courtesy warning. You'll see it down in the bottom right-hand corner. It'll be there telling you. Welcome to today's meeting of the Children and Families Scrutiny Committee here in County Hall. My name, for those of you that don't know, is Councillor Lee Redman. I'm lucky enough to have the privilege of chairing this committee. We are joined today by a number of different people doing a number of different things. I'm aware that there are some new people in the room, so just a bit of advice. For those of you that look, you can see the white labels in front of people are members of the committee. There are also councillors. We do have a collection of co-opted members. These are generally based, education based, and they're here to help and advise us and help us scrutinise education items. I'd like to pride myself on being an inclusive chair, so generally I take questions as they go. The way that we normally do it is the presenters will present to the committee. What will then happen is that I'll take an indication for anyone who wants to ask questions. You can put your hand up, wave or shout at any time during that, and we'll try and keep a list at this end and do it in an order. Generally, I do committee members first, then non-committee members in the room, and then we invite questions from those online at the time. As I say, it's important that we work hard to scrutinise, so that's the way that it works. And for those with yellow, those with sharp eyes, the ones with yellow labels in front of them, names, they're officers, members of Somerset Council. So I'm not members, they're working for Somerset Council, and generally they're here to help and advise and answer some questions as and when we bring them forward. The agenda papers have been published on the council website in advance of the meeting. Interesting point. I will pause there. Members of the committee, I owe you an apology. It's only a small one. A number of the papers were late submitted and weren't able to be circulated before the meeting. Just for clarity, what I try to do is at our pre-meeting, we try to make sure that when the papers, when the agenda goes out, that all associated papers go with it. As a week in advance, wherever possible. There are some minor exceptions, but one of the things that I like to be able to do is give members an opportunity to read the papers. When you're presented with them at the last minute, it becomes awkward. And just for full disclosure, I'm dyslexic and I like to find time to read the papers beforehand. Otherwise, I can't always comprehend what's being presented and get confused. And I don't want other people to feel as inconvenienced as myself. So I've raised it appropriately, and going forward, I will try to ensure that all papers will be circulated a week before the meeting. But I apologise for the late submission of these papers. As you can see, the next point will say supplementary agenda items were published on the 7th, 11th and 12th, respectively. So that is not a good thing. I don't like that. Today's meeting will be run in a hybrid form. I've explained about bringing people in, but I will ask those people online if they can keep your devices muted. You're welcome to join us with your face if you want to. It's always nice to see, because in this world of hybrid these days, it gets a bit frustrating when you're talking to a blank screen. It's nice to see people's faces and smiling if they say you're welcome to join us that way. If you can please raise your hand, etc., and try and keep away from the chat unless it's business appropriate to the meeting. The council's making a recording of the meeting to assist in our discussions and the minute taking. We've gone through, so the chat function, Teams, speak at the invitation. If you could please, if you remember to say your name before you start talking, it helps with us to keep the minutes, etc. Okay, item 1 of our agenda is apologies for absence, please.
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies from Councillor Snell, for whom Councillor Wilkins is substituting. We've also received apologies from Claire Winter, who's unable to attend today.
Thank you. Are there any other apologies I'm not aware of? Councillor Kenton. Put your microphone on, please.
Councillor Jason Baker.
Thank you. Okay, moving on. Item 2 of our agenda is declaration. Oh, sorry. Is that
That's not an apology. Sorry.
That's not an apology. No worries. Item 2 of our agenda is declarations of interest. Councillor Clayton.
Thank you. Yes, item 8, Regional Adoption Agency. I have a consultancy contract and independent panel member for Adopt Southwest, so I won't take any part in the discussion, but I think I'm okay just to listen.
Bruce.
Nothing on the agenda for today, but just needs to go on there that I'm currently going through mediation with Somerset Council regarding my child's EHCP.
Thank you. Any other declarations of interest that aren't already registered? Excellent, thank you. Item 3 of our agenda are the minutes of the last meeting. They've been circulated. Are you happy that I sign them as a true record? That's a positive indicator. Thank you. Are there any points from those minutes that isn't covered in the agenda? Okay, thank you. Item 4 of our agenda is public question time. I'm not aware of any public question time, and there, so we move on. We're on a roll. It won't last, I know. Item 5 of our agenda is our forward work programme. It's there, just for clarity. So for those members, so what we try to do, one of the things that became clear over the years is that I've been sat here is sometimes when during meetings, not all things, actions or points are recorded, and also it's not clear and transparent what we've done. So we've got our work tracker, our outcome tracker, which we include in that. You'll see pleasingly that a large number of those are green. So we use the red, amber, green part about it, where we make sure that we record things and show the progress of them. It helps to remind us of things that we said that we would do. If they're green, they generally stay green on our papers for 1 month, and then the following meeting they can drop off, so it just leaves amber and red and any new ones there. What we also have is, as our forward work programme, as you can see, one of the things that I believe that we're pretty much going to do is have a joint workshop with Adults and Health at the end of October. We've got to discuss a couple of things with the chair of the other committee, but hopefully that will go forward. And otherwise, you'll see that our work programme is starting to take shape. Evie.
Can I ask that the green is toned down to a lighter tone, please, because I can't read it. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for making that point. Members, any other points or comments as far as our work programme is concerned? Yeah, Jamie.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to reiterate the Chair's point, it should be in your calendars that there is a proposed joint meeting with Adults and Health on the 25th of October that's scheduled to take place at Dean House. As the Chair said, we're just in discussions with the Chair of Adults and Health Committee to finalise an agenda. Just to also highlight to committee that the meeting on the 15th of November will be held in the Sedgemoor Room in Bridgewater. There is also a further meeting in December, scheduled for the 12th of December, which will be taking place in Brimpton Way. And also members of this committee are invited to attend the Adults and Health Committee on the 5th of December for an item on overview of crime and disorder, which has relevance to this committee. Thank you, Chair.
Excellent, thank you. Any other points or comments? Okay, we move on. Item 6 of our agenda then is the Children's Services Budget Monitoring item. Just to before I introduce, just to let you know, so members, just for clarity, obviously at the last executive, it was the executive have asked all scrutiny committees to look at the appropriate parts of their budget with the view to responding and monitor, helping the executive to keep an eye on what's going on. Just for clarity, the scrutiny chairs meet with the scrutiny manager on a regular basis, and one of the things that came from that meeting was a bit of clarity. Sorry, the chairs asked for clarity over what the expectation was from the executive, and just to let you know, the 5 chairs and their vices have written back to the executive saying, you've asked us to do this, could you give us a bit of steer and a bit of clarity on what you're expecting? Just for newer members to this committee, last year when it was done, one of the things that this committee did was look at the 2 big overspends within the budget, and then we decided to do a task and finish a deep dive into those 2 items: external placements and home to school transport. The home to school transport task group was sort of overtaken a little bit by an external consultant that came in to make some advice to that. However, the group finished and did a report to say we support the findings and we look forward to come back on that point. That's one of the things that will come back to us. The external placements was one, the paper which is there, and you will see later on in the agenda there's a response. So we given our report to the executive, and then looking to come back to us on that point. So we go on to the budget comment. So budget monitoring. Sean, are you doing that one? So thank you. So if we can share the screen, members, please remember, make a note of the questions as you go. Please raise your hand as the questions come up, and then I can start, rather than me when the presentation finishes, me having to talk for a while I wait for hands to go up. So if you think of a question as we go, please shout. Otherwise, Sean, thank you.
Thank you. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Sean Kenny. I'm a finance business partner supporting children's services. You've kind of covered my intro, so thank you. The executive considered the month 4 budget monitoring report on the 6th of September last week, and the budget monitoring was recommended and accepted. The proposal was accepted by executive, or executive asked for the budget monitoring reports to be presented. First one, and we'll fit them in regularly around your work plan. But this presentation focuses on children, families and education for the Children and Family Scrutiny Committee. There is a little bit of an intro on the wider council position. The recommendations were that scrutiny are asked to consider if there are any general comments or observations that they wish to make to executive, or if the actions set out in the report are appropriate, or if there are any further actions that they wish to include. So a financial overview. The general fund net budget for the whole of the council is 493 million. Month 4 forecast overspend is 26.1 million, which is 5.3%. The 23-24 budget is based on 22-23 budget from each of the predecessor councils, and it includes 10 million use of reserves to balance the budget, plus 9.9 million one-off for specific projects, which isn't a sustainable position. The DSG allocation is a very similar number, 491.4.
Acronym alert.
Sorry. The dedicated schools grant allocation is a separate grant, but as you can see, it's a similar figure to the net budget for the general fund. It's 491.4 million, and the month 4 forecast position is a deficit in DFE language and overspend, a deficit of 14.1 million, which is 2.9%. The 23-24 forecast, as at the end of July, so we forecast based on what we know at the end of July for the full financial year, is based on month 3 Q1 positions with some updates. There's still lots of potential risks and areas to resolve, particularly around the financial system. We have environments, which are budget transfers, still to process as a result of the merger of the 5 councils. So that predominantly impacts on non-people services, not on children and adults. But we also have year-end accruals that still need to be processed in our financial system. We still have some unallocated cash, so our total income to date isn't that clear. We still need to allocate the cash to particular service areas, and we are rolling out Solver, which is our new budget monitoring tool. Also, the staffing establishment are still aligning all the HR records within budgeted posts and delivery of LGR savings. So the month 4 forecast is as good as we can forecast, but given all these potential risks and areas to still be resolved. Just an overview of the general fund, and I won't read out each of these, but it just sets out the main areas for that 21 million overspend. So adult services is forecasting 12.1, children's services 8.8, climate and place 2.7, sorry, these are millions. Strategy, workforce and localities 1.5 million, and resources and corporate services 1.3 million, and they're the main or significant variances. So focusing on children, families and education. I'm going to look at the general fund first and then come back to DS and then go on to the dedicated schools grant, DSG. In terms of the general fund, the gross expenditure budget for the service is 212 million. There's 89 million pounds worth of income budgeted. And so the net budget for the service is 123.1 million. In that table on the left, you'll see that 123.1 million in that first column, current budget. And against that, there's a full year projection of 131.9 million, which creates an 8.8 million forecast overspend, which is 7.1% of the budget. This overspend is forecast around external placements. There's 3.5 million pressure on unregistered placements, and that's to do with the number of bed placements, with demand being higher than what we'd budgeted for. At the end of June, our budget was for 545 days of unregistered placement days. Our actual days provided is at that point was 1,167. So you can see why there's a pressure. There's still time to try to bring that down and back in line. But at the moment, there's a forecast 3.5 million overspend. There's also a 3 million forecast overspend on residential placements, and that's to do with complexity of children and lack of sufficiency within fostering, both internal and external. And as was mentioned earlier, the Task and Finish group last year looked at this area. Within the 23-24 budget, there's transformation savings targets, and for children's services, the target was £4.6 million, part of the MTFP, and they're listed on the table. What we can see at the moment is that the Early Help Fund savings target has already been achieved. There are savings on track around the Homes to Inspire strategic partnership and family safeguarding. And specifically, just to mention in the notes on the right-hand side of this table, around Homes to Inspire, the target saving was 820,000. The actual forecast saving that we're expecting is 1.2 million. And actually, since writing the month 4 position, we think this is increasing. So there's an overachievement of saving against the Homes to Inspire strategic partnership. The savings at risk relate to the Family Intervention Service, the Staying Close pods as part of the strategic partnership, the diagnostic review of children's services, and a turnover factor within children's services. And the turnover factor is about natural turnover in staffing, where vacancies, although the service is actively recruiting to fill those vacancies, there is a gap. And that is called kind of the turnover factor. That's natural turnover. So it's not freezing posts. The service is still actively trying to recruit, but it's just the gap between people handing in the notice leaving and being able to fill those posts. The key cost drivers, the pressure is on children's services. So the key cost drivers on this slide, and I apologise, it's a bit busy, but I tried to split it into two and it didn't really flow. So if you bear with me, if we start with the graph in the top left-hand corner with the spike, that graph is CLA data, children looked after. So we can see that the children looked after trajectory, the dotted line going through the middle of that graph, has been relatively stable since January 2022. But there was an unexpected spike in the summer in 2022. And these are children, generally teenage children with complex needs. And the impact of that spike has been that there's been an increase in the number of external placements and also a higher cost of those placements because of the complex needs. So that little arrow then flows down to that table in the bottom left-hand corner, which shows the blue is that's the blue line at the bottom. The two blue lines relate to placement numbers. So these are placements that are active at a point in time. So the number of placements, and the light blue line at the bottom shows the placement numbers last year, and the dark blue line shows what we're seeing at the start of this financial year. So you can see that our placement numbers are already more than they were last year. And the green line over on the right hand axis is placement days. So a placement will be at a point in time will have a number of placement days provided and attached to that placement, And the placement days in total last year is the bottom light green line, and that shows that that's around 110,000 placement days were provided or purchased. And we can already see that at the start of this financial year, we're forecasting to buy more of those days. So it's not just about the number of children, it's the number of days that those children are in placement. And both of those are increasing or have increased since last year. And those are mainly around three areas. Unaccompanied asylum seeking children, you ask around the National Transfer Scheme, residential placements because of the complexity of need and lack of sufficiency in fostering sector, and the bespoke 16 plus supported accommodation, also with complexity of need increasing. It's offset slightly by the reduction in external fostering placements, which would be cheaper if we could get them instead of the residential placements. And then, so if you add to that, which is the plus, the blue plus, and move to the bottom right-hand graph, that talks about the cost of those placements. And there is we attach an average weekly cost to different types of placements. And we can see on that graph that the average weekly cost of unregistered placements, which is the highest bar there, £23,500 a week, is a 5% increase since last year. And although the residential cost of a placement is less than an unregistered placement at around £5,000 a week, that has actually increased by 10% since last financial year. So hopefully that flow makes sense. Shall I reshare? Oh, I've dropped off the call.
It's just to let you know that there are issues with the Wi-Fi. It sometimes drops out, so it's a technical error. So while Sean's just coming back in, Francis, is it relevant to?
Yes, I think so. Could the slides be emailed to us? Then if it drops out, we can all look at them. Also, they're complicated and dense, and if we're going to ask questions, I think we need to be looking at them.
They'll be in your inbox in a moment.
So in the top right hand corner, that pie chart is focusing on the unregistered placement days. As I mentioned earlier, we had a budgeted amount of placement days that we would provide or buy when we set the budget, and we can see that already over half of the budgeted unregistered placement days have been provided already in the first quarter of the year.
Yeah.
Probably sharing the wrong page.
I think it's just catching up on our screen.
Does that work?
I think.
No, that's fine.
No, we'll get there.
Should catch up. If we like.
Members, can you see what we see on the big tellies?
Shall I unshare and start sharing again, or shall I wait for it to catch up?
I would say it would normally have caught up by now, so I'd try and reshare it.
Okay.
Again.
Thank you.
I'll just share on the slide. I don't know if that
It's just through live.
It's come now. It's there.
Does that work?
That's it.
Okay, excellent.
Don't we love technology?
How many millions of pounds have we spent on this plan?
Not as much as Birmingham.
Carry on.
Okay, so the forecast overspend of 8.8 million, that forecast is based on things that we're more certain of and things that are we can forecast with some certainty. But there are also risks and issues that we know are around us and around the service that we haven't been able to or we haven't necessarily been able to quantify in terms of those future risks. So the 5 areas that the service are recognising, acknowledging that we might not have been able to capture in our forecast. The 5 risks and issues are around the external residential market, the cost of living crisis and reducing budgets in partner organisations. So the impact of that, not just on residents, but our partner organisations and their ability to fund services. The 16 plus supported accommodation, there's a new inspection regime that Ofsted have enacted, and there are also insufficient independent accommodation places in Somerset. The reduction in education partnership and skills traded income from schools is a risk where schools are academising, and also an area where the Scrutiny Committee looked at last year was home to school transport. So last year there was an overspend on home to school transport, which was the bulk of the previous year's overspend. There was additional funding put into the budget for this financial year around inflation and demand. We're still trying to understand what that looks like in terms of this financial year and how the that were mentioned earlier and what the impact of their recommendations will have. So there are risks and issues still around those areas that may or may not impact on the forecast for this year, but most definitely will impact on the budget for next financial year. But there are also opportunities, and the service has it has got a transformation programme with improvements and are working with partners across healthcare and education. The strategies that are listed here, or the transformation programmes, are the new placement and educare sufficiency strategy, Homes and Horizons, Education for Life strategy, our SEND strategy, Connect Somerset, and the School Transport Review. Oh, that's jump 2. Can everybody see an implementing financial controls slide? Oh, excellent. It seemed to jump. So part of the executive paper that went last week, there were financial controls that the executive agreed, and services and DMTs are looking to develop financial recovery plans where they aren't already in place. They're developing them where they are already in place. They're working on implementing those. There isn't necessarily a corporate recruitment freeze. Each service area is asked to consider it within their own service, within their own statutory and discretionary responsibilities. There are 3 areas that have been identified around controls, savings. So are each of the services delivering their 23-24 approved savings? We can see that we're over, based on that slide that I produced earlier, we're overachieving in some areas. We're on target for some, but there are still some saving areas at risks. We're not at the moment saying they're unachievable, but we will continue to monitor that through the year, and there are mitigating actions in place to try to ensure that those savings are achieved. Staffing, each service area is asked to review and or defer or delay permanent, temporary, interim, agency or casual recruitments unless it's overridden by exception where there's statutory minimum staffing levels, for example. The third area is identifying underspending opportunities. So last year, where some services had underspends in their budgets, those services have been asked to go back and look at those underspends. There were some areas in children's services that were underspending, but the overall position for children's last year was an overspend. Has that moved on? No. Specific actions for the DMTs, the Directorate Management Teams. Those DMTs are being asked to impose financial transaction limits, so maybe escalate or push approvals up to senior management level, reviewing any local schemes of delegation to managers for spending decisions, for example, around authorisation of adult or children's social care packages, impose limits on certain types of non-critical expenditure, setting target reductions for certain types of categories of expenditure, curtailing or value engineering one-off or project spend, or exploring alternative funding. So each of the directorate management teams are being asked to consider those things. And finally, we can't forget capital, but the bulk of the spending in children's services is revenue. This pie chart presents the total capital programme for the council, and the capital programme for 23-24 is £404 million. Sorry, 404. Yeah, £404 million. The light green slice at the top is the school services capital, and then there's a very small slice in grey for children and families. So there's a total capital budget for children and families of 77.9 million, and the table in the bottom left-hand corner there just summarises what those programmes and those schemes are for children's services. The capital programme is being reviewed as part of following the Q1 report, where all of the capital programme was brought together. So we will have more information on forecast position around capital in Q2. I've just realised that my slide skipped on and I missed DSG, sorry. So the dedicated schools grant, the table there is quite complicated, and I apologise for it. There are actually a lot more columns to this, and I've tried to condense it. But there is a cumulative balance brought forward for the dedicated schools grant, and at the start of April, this was 20.7 million. That sits outside the reserves of the council for the moment while there is a statutory override, which is due to end in March 2026. The total allocation for 23-24, so the dedicated schools grant totals 491.4 million. And the forecast for the in-year position is that we will end this financial year with a 14.1 million deficit, ultimately an overspend. And that deficit is then added to the start of the year cumulative deficit. So we'll end the financial year, or forecast to end the financial year, with a £34.8 million deficit on dedicated schools grant. You can see there are 4 blocks within the dedicated schools grant: the schools block, the central school services block, early years block, and high needs block. And you can see that the pressure is mainly around high needs, and those 4 bullet points at the bottom of the slide explain where that pressure is playing out. We actually started the year with a planned deficit of 5.6 million. That was because of growth of EHCPs and lack of sufficiency in previous years, and that demand doesn't just go away at the start of a financial year. So at the start of financial year, we were already forecasting that, based on the allocation from the DFE of 85.2 million, we would be overspending by 5.6 million. And then added to that, what's happened since the start of the year is we've continued to see an increase above what we'd originally planned around placements and insufficient maintained specialist provision for pupils with SEMH, social, emotional and mental health needs. And that's added to that original planned deficit of 5.6 million by 4.1 million. There are increases in the number and complexity of placements in mainstream schools, where the high needs block provides a top up in their funding, and that's because of new and extended EHCPs and the related costed packages of that provision. And then also a contribution to the children looked after. So we see the increase in the pressure and external placements on the general fund. Those children are assessed for education needs as well, and there's contributions from the dedicated schools grant for those children. And because of the pressure on the external placements, we're then also seeing a pressure on the education funding for those placements. Like the graphs around the general fund and external placements, there are key drivers around the high needs block. That top left-hand graph shows the total number of education, health and care plans. There's no spike in this one like we saw in the external placements. This is a steady growth in number of children with EHCPs since 2018. Somerset was previously an outlier nationally because of policy, but that's changed. So we start to see the increase from 2018. The national increase in proportion of school pupils rose from 2.9% to 4.3%, and Somerset is slightly above that national average at 4.5%. The bottom right-hand graph shows the number of children in independent non-maintained specialist schools. So the number of children with EHCPs, they will be in provisions around all settings, but we know that independent non-maintained INMS schools are more expensive, approximately £30,000 per pupil per year. And because of lack of efficiency in specialist settings, that provision is provided by INMS schools, and so we see a steady increase in number of children with EHCPs in independent non-maintained school settings. Similar to the general fund, we forecast what we kind of know and we've got more certainty on, but there are risks and issues around the DSG cumulative deficit, which continues to increase. The statutory override, as I mentioned earlier, is due to expire in March 2026. Increase in demand for EHCPs continues, demand for placements exceeding the growth in the provision of specialist settings, and sufficiency of provision for SEMH, social, emotional, mental health support, and delays opening new special SEMH free school. But there are opportunities, and there is a transformation programme with improvements, and again working across health, care and education partners. There's a specialist capital programme around expanding and improving the specialist estate, which should give us an additional 361 places. The DFE High Needs Capital Grant we've been allocated, which will also enable us to develop school satellites and enhanced learning provision in mainstream settings, and also the therapeutic education provision. There are 2 new free schools opening in September 24 and September 27, which will give us an extra 120 plus 64 places. There was a diagnostic from Empower around early intervention support, which is now being implemented. DBV opportunities, which could realise just over 1 million by the end of 24-25, and a cumulative benefit of 7.93 million. Sorry. Delivering better value for SEND. It's a national programme that the DFE launched after the safety valve programme, and there were 55 local authorities involved in that programme, and Somerset was one of them. I think that's me done in a slightly different order than planned, sorry.
So thank you for that. Members, just so that you know, they don't scare you too much. This is obviously the first time we've had the presentation like this. Going forward, it will be there with enough time for you to have a look at it. But and I'm not expecting you to understand it all now. If you want to make your little notes and ask questions after the meeting, you're welcome to do so. Just for clarity, just so I'll start, Bruce. I've got you at the moment. If anyone else wants to indicate, then they can. But just a couple of questions. Slide 10 was talking about EHCP, education, health and care plans. I just need to get my head around that. It says that there's the best part of 5,000 EHCPs. Now, is that 5,000 active in place in Somerset?
Yeah.
That's an important. That's why I wanted to make that point, because when we members, we need to be aware of that and so, because one would assume obviously this has been going since 2021. Some of them will be falling off the bottom, but some more will be coming on the top. So it's an important. Going forward, we need to be clear, you know, when we talk about that number of education, health and care plans in place, it gives you an indication of why and where budgets are being impacted. Councillor Munt, I see you have your hand up.
Yes, if you don't mind, just if I may just make an observation about that, Lee. It's not just those 5,100 children who have their education and healthcare plans. The need is coming from younger people now, but additionally, I would just point out that each one of those is subject to an annual review. So whereas back in, say, 2019, we had 2,100 young people, now we're reviewing annually, attempting to review annually 5,100 education and healthcare plans.
Thank you for the clarification. I just wanted to make that because it's an important point to make, and thank you for the clarity there. Okay, so I've got a couple of members indicating. So Ruth, Mrs. Hobbs.
Okay, so this is a bit challenging having it this late, I'm going to say, and not seeing it in advance. So I'm going to, I'm going to give it a go. So my first question is, you talk about one of the big risks being school transport, and also one of the opportunities being school transport. And you may not be able to answer this question, but as a committee, we were promised a copy of that school transport review 2 scrutinies ago, and then at the last scrutiny, the Director of Children's Services promised that it would be sent out to us. Now, I haven't seen it, and I don't know if anybody else has, but it would be helpful for us to be able to understand what's in that report and how those savings potentially are going to be made. The other thing is, you mentioned on one of your slides around DMT, if I can find it, that there is they've been asked to review authorisation of adults or children's social care packages. And I think I would like to understand more about that, bearing in mind that at our last scrutiny, we had a lot of questions from the public around lack of social care provision for respite. And so I think we need to be more aware of that and understand what that actually means and what the risks are around that. The other thing is, can you confirm around the Developing Better Value for Send programme, when the funding came in to support that programme, and when we'll see a report about how the opportunities are starting to see those reductions? So you're talking about that by the end of next financial year, £1 million will potentially be saved. When are we going to start seeing something about how that's actually impacting, and is that doing what we need it to do? Because obviously, clearly, from the presentation this morning, just looking at it quickly, the high needs overspend is a major issue for Somerset. And if that programme is going to help to address that, I think we need to understand that a bit better. So when will we start seeing some of that coming to life, I suppose, and being real?
So the 55 local authorities that were part of the Delivering Better Value programme received £1 million grant each, irrelevant of size of the local authority or number of high needs support provision. That £1 million was received at the start of the financial year, this financial year. There is an inclusion transformation programme, and the detail around the specific projects within that DBV programme are being developed. Some have started to be implemented and some are being developed in a bit more detail. The DBV programme was high level opportunities, and so what the service has been doing since the start of the financial year is to develop the detail around each of those project areas.
Son, if you want to pause for a second, I think Amelia wants to come in.
So I believe that the forward agenda, there is a plan to review the entire Children's Services Transformation Programme with this committee in the meeting in November. As you've indicated, the DBV is a national programme, but if we're looking at some of the challenges we've just been discussing, as you've already indicated, they are children's services challenges, and some of them go beyond children's services. They impact on things like housing or adults and other teams and partners, and health is a significant contributor to delivering transformation. So you know, with the scale of the challenges that we're seeing here, you know, this is not tweaking around the edges territory. We will need to be doing some things significantly differently. We're going to address this kind of generational challenge, and this is not just a Somerset problem. This is an enormous national problem, and the F40 group that we're a member of has calculated that the system will need an approximately additional £4.6 billion to address the trajectories that you've just seen. That's not small money. That's national level significant change money. So, but locally, we can't sit and wait for that national debate. We've been waiting a long time for that national debate around adult social care, as you're aware. So we are going to need significant transformation, and that will need to be cross-cutting. So we are reviewing and integrating the various transformation projects that are already in train to make sure that they are as impactful and interconnected as they can be. And that is on the agenda to go through with you in detail in November. Can I also say, and I know colleagues flagged, this is very dense. If I know some of you joined us, and thank you for that, joined us last Thursday, we provided an all-member briefing on education finance. We will be repeating that tomorrow. So if any of you have not had the opportunity to join that session, understanding the mechanics of things like the dedicated schools grant, I think is something that I would recommend to all of you. So please, that is, if you are able to do so and haven't already, please do join us tomorrow for that briefing. I promise it's designed for the level of all of us. I'm not a finance specialist myself in terms of getting to grips with this area.
Thank you, Amelia. Before I bring Sean back in to answer the rest of Ruth's questions, or someone to answer some of Ruth's questions, I had the school's budget briefing down on the note. So what I will ask is if we can make sure that invite is shared with our co-opted members as well, and just to remind them of that, because it is. I was going to say it later, but I'll say it now. As you will see from the budget, education, for those of you that have been around for a while, has come into our budget monitoring process. So we need to be more aware of what's going on there. I'm hoping that the education subcommittee will be looking at that as well as us, but that there are needs to grow. So I'll make sure that the link is sent out in relation to that. The DBV, that's part of the Newton Europe stuff, isn't it, as well? So as long as, the indication is it's coming to us, because Tessa might be able to answer the decision you're going to be taking imminently, isn't it? I think in relation to the DBV, there's the delivering better value, and so that's on the forward plan, I believe, and it's coming to this committee in November to have a deep dive, a better look at it, and a better understanding of where we are with that.
That's my understanding. What's on the forward plan is it will be the DBV, but it'll be the transformation programme as a whole.
Okay, that's fine. Jane or Sean with the rest of Ruth's questions.
I'd have to follow up the circulation of the transport report.
Yeah, I'll take that away as an action, Chair.
And the better understanding about decision making for social care packages, I think that's probably something that I could work with Jane and Rob on and bring back.
I think that'd be helpful. I think considering the amount of public interest in the subject, I think we need to be really clear about what we're saying when we say that, because that could set alarm bells ringing for some of our families in reality.
We'd note that on the outcome tracker by way of a written report that will come back and then do it that way. Okay, next on my list then. Thank you, Bruce, for your questions. Richard next, and then.
I think my question's been pretty much answered, actually. I wanted to understand about the Newton England. It's been reported nationally that they're targeting a sort of 20% reduction in EHCPs, and I just wondered how that affected our budget. I didn't really understand that the DBV was part of it. But thanks.
Okay, so hopefully we covered that one for you. Councillor Nicholson, Francis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think probably quite a lot of my questions I ought to take out outside the meeting, but the principal thing that I'm say perhaps before a couple of questions is the budget crisis is acute. Children's services above all others have got to have the children in the centre of the room and not the budget cuts and the savings in the centre of the room. And I do want reassurance that we're not going to go for better value means cheaper, and actually it doesn't deliver for the child who needs the support in the school, or isn't that we can be as imaginative as we possibly can be. We don't have to spend lots of money on IMS schools if occasionally we could spend slightly less than that money but more than the usual in one of our own mainstream schools, if it, et cetera, et cetera. So it's child in the middle that I really want. Just a couple of things. 89 million pounds worth of income, is that grants or is that contributions from partners or what? Because that's quite a large chunk of our 212, isn't it? What is it?
Yeah, it's a mixture of grant, traded income around Amelia's services. So Amelia has a £14 million traded income service. Some of the DSG comes in to fund some of the general fund stuff. I think it's around 8 million of total DSG. Contributions from partners, so where health contribute to external placements. And I think there's a small amount of parent contributions, but Jane and I were discussing this yesterday. Tiny.
Yeah.
I think that's the bulk of it. Grants, traded income and contributions from health.
Yeah.
The grants are things like youth justice grant, off the top of my head, I've forgotten something.
Okay,
Supporting families, troubled families grant. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, may I carry on? We're predicting an overachievement of savings through Homes to Horizons, which is wonderful because that is absolutely children in the room, and absolutely the right thing. We know that the DFE, one part of the DFE at least, is absolutely on board and has given us lots of grants to spend more capital to expand the system. Do we think that if we're already predicting a really high overachievement, I mean, 40% or so, do we think that it's possible that will go on growing? And secondly, is there any possibility of more capital from the DFE to expand that? And those are, I think, questions not for finance. Perhaps that's is there anybody who wants to comment on that at the moment?
Thank you, Chair. Two things I'd like to say. Thank you, Francis, for your comments. I think, yes, children are at the centre, and that's probably part of our difficulty in trying to save money.
Absolutely.
So it would be very easy to cut everything, but that's not what we're in the business of doing, are we? We're trying to think widely and deeply and very openly, and I don't think anyone's ideas are off the table. No idea would be dismissed, and everything should be explored when we're trying to find new ways of doing things, and we have to tackle this in some open and different ways. The thing I would say about the Homes and Horizons project is that I'd like to recognise the efforts of two staff in particular, but the team as a whole, in firstly being cautious in making their predicted savings, but secondly, after we'd got to that stage and as we've gone through the process, throughout the process, they have actually worked really hard alongside all the different parties involved to make sure that we have questioned and challenged the costs of various elements of the project and have got answers which have delivered further savings. And I cannot thank them enough. But it's not just those two individuals, it's a whole team approach. And I think it's good for all of us. with regard to your question to the DFE, we use every opportunity to try and get money from the DFE. I don't think we're going to let up on that at all. And we're pursuing a number of avenues to try and see whether we can actually help them to understand our way of thinking about these projects. I'll leave it at that. I don't know whether any of the team wants to. Yes, Amelia's got her mitt up.
If I may just go back to the point about children versus money. And I think one of the things that is most striking about our budgets that are most overspent is that it is being driven by things where we wouldn't do it if we had a choice. So if we were in a situation where all of that money was going on something that was buying something essential for a child that is worth its weight in gold, then we would all be sitting here thinking, well, we're overspending, but that money is so essentially buying something valuable. But a lot of the overspending is being driven by placements in institutions that we don't think are having the outcomes that are, in some cases, even adequate. In other cases, absolutely could be replicated in an institution that was much cheaper, but there's no place. There's no place for them. So I think that's a place none of us want to be, because we are spending sometimes eye-watering amounts of money and not getting value from it. We're simply, our hands are tied, and we have no options because there's nowhere else to go. So I think that that's the kind of place where actually something's got to give. We've got to do things differently. We have very few options open to us, but things like Homes and Horizons are designed to give us options again, and to try and break out of some of that pattern of spending money without the value attached to it.
Come back with just one final one.
If you could be
very as quickly as I can. Yes, and Homes and Horizons is a fantastic and new and different way of looking at. I would encourage us to go on looking at new and different ways and look at our neighbours to see whether there is another way out of the uncontrollable profit motive of independent non-maintained schools, to bring that back within our own, to some extent, within our own control. And there are models that are coming forward.
Thank you, Francis. Yes, I mean, as I said, no idea is ever dismissed out of hand. But as Amelia's alluded to, the fact is that we're in a situation where there's a completely disgusting market where people are required to make 25% profit, and that should never, ever happen in services for adults, let alone children. So we're at the mercy. And we try every way we possibly can to make sure that we work around and up and over and through that to get a better solution for children.
Thank you. Okay, I've got two other members that have indicated to speak. John Hunt, Councillor Hunt. John, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. God, I feel like depressed from Taunton. This is just beyond, isn't it? We find ourselves in just an awful position. Just a couple of things from me. The 5,000, I think we said 5,100 people, children rather, on the educational healthcare plans, and going up. I've just been Googling how many educational possibility places we've got in Somerset. I think it's 78,000, I may be wrong. On that basis, and the average class of 30 in most of our schools, there's sort of one child in every 15 then has one of these EHCs, which I find absolutely an extraordinary number. So just over 6% of the children have one, and that bar just seems to be increasing steadily year on year. And I don't know how we overcome that. Clearly there is a huge issue there. A completely different subject, the RAC, RAAC, the reinforced concrete issue in our schools. I just wonder where that comes in, and do we have any schools with it? And if we do, have we made that, have we added that to our forward budgeting? I presume there would be some sort of grant anyway from government, but I don't know of any schools, I have to say. In terms of Councillor Wilkins and I actually went to a very interesting police forum last night, where we met Mark Shelford and were able to discuss um, the worrying police statistics, but relating to children and adults, obviously. But they were saying that 1/3 of their call-out shouts are to mental health issues, and it's paperwork. It's two policemen per have to stay with many of these school-age children who they're dealing with as well, and 1/3 of their time is taken up with that. And I'm concerned too, is that eventually, and where it should be placed, of course, I would have thought would be with us as a council rather than the police force. So is that something else that's going to become not a burden on our finances? I don't mean it that way, but an additional issue for our finances when that problem, one assumes, would be transferred across. I don't know what we're doing about that. But it just seems, the whole thing just seems a mess, and Amelia's right. I think we do have to change the way this is being done. Great news on the Homes to Inspire. That I've always liked that. I think we all agree on that. It's a tremendous scheme. Can we increase that, and how quickly can we do that? I appreciate it's very difficult to find the homes in the first place and get them going, but with the increase from 800,000 to 1.2 million and over, it does look a very good way of thinking differently. And if we can do that with the other institutional type situations as well, we may well gain some finance back there. But it just, I'm not sure what my question is. The concrete is one thing, but certainly an explanation on the EHCs would be interesting as to why they're going up. Do we know? And is there ways of tackling the issue from perhaps a parental perspective on that? Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Councillor. So I'll try and address some of them, and then just in an effort to try and be concise. So I think you'll find in your inbox, councillors, there's a paper in relation to RAC. And a comment there about from memory, I think there may be one school that is of concern. So that's partly good news. As far as your mental health question in relation to that, we already have, as a committee, acknowledged the need to look at children's mental health issues. That's in January. We've got a report coming to us there and a presentation in relation to that. And Homes and Horizons members, you've heard me sing the praise of Homes and Horizons for a long time. So we acknowledge as a committee the fact that it's a good project. And I've said it before, let's not go pinning too much of our hopes upon it, because they've got to let them do the work in a sensible way rather than try and rush them to make savings. It is a wonderful project. I think I've covered most. Oh, EHCPs. One of the things I will suggest, and this will not necessarily for our work programme, I think education, health and care plans are something that is a really interesting point that we need to get a better grip on and understanding. So what I'll do, I'll ask the service through Jane if perhaps we could find a paper of some sort that talks about education, health and care plans, and mainly to explain how they came about and the body of them. And I'll summarise it very quickly. Previously, as a council, there was an expectation that we did it all. So the breaking in the previous model, with the new model, a good plan for a child involves all of the appropriate bodies that are in part of it. So education, health and care, rather than just one body having to take the blame for it, or the main weight of it. That's why it was done. But I'll see if we can get a paper out, which would help hopefully members get a better understanding of education.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I think my question was, why is it going up? Do we know the reason for the increase? And worrying, I think, if it's going to continue on that level.
Media.
I don't think anyone has a definitive answer, but I think generally nationally, it's felt that this is tied to COVID. Something changed in COVID, and certainly in Somerset, that trajectory had been going up already pre-COVID because of the historic fact that we were way below national. So work was underway to get us back into a place that was similar to other areas. But then that increase in Somerset hit a national increase, as it was indicated, post-COVID, and various things have changed around COVID, but also in society and the national dialogue around the prevalence of neurodiversity, for example. Something has changed in society, so nobody knows when this is going to stop. But nationally, the same pattern is being seen around the country.
And something the officers can't say, John, is the fact that parents have become more uh, aware of the process as well. So that there's that. But I wouldn't. That's just a personal statement. If anyone's listening. Okay. Thank you, John. Simon, Councillor Carl's.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of questions. Diagnostic review. I noticed on one of the pages said that costing £1 million and potential savings of £1 million, which are at risk. Can you just explain what the diagnostic review means? With children of asylum seekers, do we get any central government funding for the placement of the children in our area? My question on the EHCPs has largely been answered. I notice there's a target to reduce them. Hopefully that won't be by upping the thresholds for EHCPs, which would obviously then reduce the number, but wouldn't be the answer to the problem. Thank you.
Chair, shall I pick up on the question about unaccompanied asylum seeking children? Yes, we do receive some government funding. So these children can arrive with us one of two ways, either spontaneous arrivals, which we do have a number and have had a number in the last few weeks, or through the National Transfer Scheme. We receive a maximum of £1,000 per week, depending on how they arrive. And currently that does put some pressure on the budget because some of our placements that we need to put these young people in are more costly than that. So we're working really hard, one, to increase foster homes for these children, and also to work with providers around that more specialist provision to meet their needs.
The diagnostic review was an Empower diagnostic review, and unfortunately probably Richard was the best person to answer that question. I don't know whether...
We'll note the question and we'll give a written response if you like. If you can make that, ask Richard to give it, and we'll make sure that we'll get that as a response. Okay, members, thank you for that. I've got a couple of points just for going forward. Sean, next time we talk about months 4, but we don't actually see the table with the current position on. So you've got your end of year proposal where it shows a projected overspend of 8.8 million in one area. It would be helpful going forward when we have the next presentation that it's clearer in relation to a table that shows where we are rather than where we might be.
I will be able to do that when we have the solver system in place.
Okay, that's fine. The next time it might be interesting to have a bit of more detail around when you're talking about we haven't sorted out where the money is and what is going forward. You're talking about veerments for different bits here, cash and stuff. A little bit more detail around that might be helpful. And as far as it's always a concern for me when I hear this is just my perspective as a moving money from here, there, and backwards and forwards. A little bit more detail around, just so that we're transparent about it and why we need to do that, I think would be the point that I make. I welcome the fact that as a service we identify risks that are there, and a one-liner in relation to what those risks are, perhaps a little bit more detail around that, so that I'm just thinking ahead. The executive have asked us to look at the budget. If we can have as much information about it as possible, but then we can start try and identify bits that we want to dive into or look into, because we've already said external placements are an issue. We know that. We did a task. So are we looking at the same thing again? I don't think. Let's see if we can dig a little bit deeper and see where it comes in the report. Otherwise, I thank you for that. So just very quickly, in summary, I will say, members, I'm sorry, it is a complex animal, and we would be, if we weren't already being asked to look at it, I promise you we would be asking to look at it because of the pivotal nature it has for this council. What I will say is we must, and it's been mentioned a couple of times all the way through, consider young people in all of our bits of this, because one of my greatest concerns is when we've saved money here, but if a young person has been impacted by that saving in a negative way, then that's wrong. We need to be looking at the young people need to be the centre of everything we do, and that's one of the things that this committee would have. We've talked about lots this morning, EHCP numbers, home to school transport, we've mentioned again, the DBV, delivering better value, which we were talking, and I think that is going to be an interesting point that we would want to look at more as we go through. Homes and Horizons and a company Asylum Seekers. I think in the budget, I think we for looking at seeing it for the first time today, a lot of us we've done really well and delved in. So thank you, Sean, for bringing it to us. Thank you, officers, for that. What we'll do is obviously through the minutes we'll highlight the bits that we've got and the follow-up stuff from it. Otherwise, thank you. We'll move on. I can't draw that item to a close and we'll look to move on. And item 7 of our agenda, which is educating model in relation to Froome. I'll let Phil talk about it in a minute, and Phil explains it. This is more a matter of giving us a heads up and then explaining the current position. Whereas what I have asked is that within the presentation that we treat this as a unknown in as far as that let's start from the bottom so we get an understanding of that. And I thank you, Phil, for your presentation. I think the presentation will take us on a journey, and at the end of it, we'd have learned a good position about where we are and potentially what and why we're here. Amelia, are you introducing it, or is Phil going to go straight in?
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. Jamie, are you able to share the presentation from? Thank you.
Introduce yourself, Phil.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. My name is Phil Curd. I'm the Head of Education Places here at Somerset Council. So we're going to show you some slides in a moment. As Lee said, we're going to take you on a journey through a piece of work we have been doing with the schools in Froome, various other stakeholders. But it's very chronological and sets out what we have done to date, what we plan to do going forwards, a range of risks and issues which may make the journey bumpy at times.
Just getting the slides ready. Committee, just bear with us.
Thank you, Fiona. If we can move to the introduction slide, please, Jamie. Thank you. So back in January of this year, we began conversations with the schools in the Froome area, really at their third invitation to facilitate a conversation around education structures in the Froome area. And we began that conversation by sending a survey to the head teachers of all 18 of the schools in Froome, really to understand their position on the current structure in Froome, what issues they saw which related to that structure, and what improvements they would make to that structure if they were able to do so. We then followed that survey up with a summary report and met all 18 schools along with representatives from the Diocese in Bath and Wales, a couple of multi-academy trusts, the Regional Director's Office at Selwood Academy. At that meeting, which was a really productive meeting, it's a face-to-face meeting, and all of our Froome meetings will be face-to-face meetings. We agreed to go away and do some modelling in relation to a two-tier area, or a two-tier education structure for the Froome area. So you'll see the slide in front of you. Froome is a particularly complex education area. There are 18 state-maintained schools in a three-tier area, and for those that aren't au fait with three-tier education, that means a first school, a middle school, and an upper school with a sixth form. So in Froome, we have one upper school, two middle schools, two primary schools, which are not three-tier schools. We have a primary middle school, which doesn't necessarily align to the structure either. We have 11 first schools, and we have one all through special school. 10 of the schools are currently local authority maintained, while 8 are academies, and there are 6 different academy trusts within the Frome area. 10 of the schools also have religious articles, mostly Anglican, but also Methodist and Catholic. So I think that single slide in the Frome area helps to summarise how complex education systems and structures are and how disparate they have become in certain areas as a result of national policy. Thank you, Jamie. So by May 2023, we had prepared a number of 2-tier models for school leaders and other stakeholders to consider. And as part of that work, we visited all of the 18 schools in person to meet individually with the head teacher and also tour the site and get an understanding of the context in which the school was working in. We also spent time walking around the local community to understand how Frome as a town and as a community operated too. By the end of May 23, we held another meeting with all stakeholders at Selwood Academy to discuss the modelling and other areas of interest during our visits to schools. So while there was not a general consensus to adopt a 2-tier model, there was an appetite to progress our discussions further over an extended period of time and introduce other elements and invite additional stakeholders to engage in the process. At regular intervals, the 8 councillors representing the Frome area were given updates on discussions and the likely direction of our future work. Now, about this time, we became aware that there were some anxiety or tension within the local community, and some schools or stakeholders were sharing information which was not necessarily accurate in relation to the discussions we were having. So on the next slide, you will see that we put out a community statement, which was then distributed by the schools. And it really kind of to set out for the wider public, the wider community, the children, the families, what we were doing and with who, and that we were not there to implement change. And actually, if you look at the structure of those 18 schools in Frome, the LA's ability to implement change is really limited by the number of academy trusts and other stakeholders engaged. I'll just give you time to read the statement. I won't read it out myself. Okay, thank you, Jamie. Then in terms of the next steps of this specific piece of work, in June 23, we began preparations for extending the piece of work into next spring. A further survey was sent out to all of the school leaders to ask them to confirm which subject areas they'd like to incorporate in our discussions and which additional stakeholders they'd like to engage in those conversations with us. The steering group meetings begin in the autumn and they will be in-person meetings held at Frome Town Council. The subject areas are likely to include education structures and partnerships, post-16 provision, early years, SEND and vulnerable learners. And Frome Town Council, as I mentioned just now, is very keen to be involved in this work and has offered to host all of the steering group meetings going forward. That outlines what we plan to do next. On the next slide, Jamie, if you could go on, please. Just outline those risks and issues. This is a moving feast and there are many moving parts in this conversation, and some of this we can control to a certain degree. Some of it is outside of our control, but we have to acknowledge it in our conversations with schools. So in parallel to our ongoing discussions, we know that schools will continue to consider their individual circumstances in relation to whether they academise or change their age ranges, for example. And as those conversations progress outside of our wider conversation, there's a risk that there is greater complexity to our work in the short term, but in the medium term, many of the proposed changes that you'll see bulleted below are likely to reduce the overall number of stakeholders in the system and to some degree simplify the conversations and maybe streamline our ability to implement change. So changes that we currently know about: Selwood Academy, the middle school, has formally consulted to change its age range, but has yet to submit a business case to the Office of the Regional Director. Frome Community College, the upper school, has applied to become an academy and join the Midsummer Norton Schools Partnership Trust. The potential conversion date is September 2024. St Louis Primary School, that's the Catholic primary school, will become an academy in April 2024 and join the Dunstan Education Partnership. And then the first schools at Beckington, Berkeley, Mells, Norton St Philip, Road and Trinity have begun the academisation process with potential conversion dates in late 2024. And then the last slide is just to invite questions from you to Amelia and I.
Thank you, Phil, for that. Thank you, members, for your observance. First question is from Councillor Nicholson. Francis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm very aware of the complexity of this kind of work and the difficulties and the perceptions and I do commend this sort of work. We need to look up how to make sure that our schools support our children. One of the things that the question is about members, but not mentioned in the slides. I think it's really important to involve members, local members, quite closely. Otherwise, it's highly likely that hares will go off in all sorts of directions. And I don't know whether you've yet been able to do that. If not, I would encourage it as soon as possible.
Thank you, Francis. So at regular intervals, we've been informing the 8 local councillors in relation to our work. We've also formally invited them to be part of the ongoing steering group. Not necessarily all 8 to join, but between them, if they can nominate 1 or 2 to be the local councillor representation on the group, then that would be really helpful for us.
Sorry,
Again, it was one of the points that we discussed previously, whether Phil was an expert hearing me whinge in his ear about TLC, so to tell local councillors. So that's one of the points of there. Ruth, please.
I've got 4 questions, if that's okay, Chair. I'll do them one at a time to be nice to you, Phil. So the first thing is sort of carrying on from what Francis said. Have governors and families been involved in any of these conversations? Because from having done the area review in Ilminster, I know exactly how important it is to have governors on board.
Thank you, Ruth. So yes, governing bodies, multi-academy trusts have all been involved in our initial conversations, and many chairs of governors were present when we visited the individual school sites. In relation to families, we have not engaged with the wider community at this point because we don't have a proposal to share with them. But our intention, should we get to a point where we have a proposal, before we go through the statutory process, is informally consult with the community, just sense check where we are and where we're going, and understand whether we need to make further revisions before going to any kind of statutory process.
Just to pick up on that last point, obviously some of you have already alluded to the fact that we went through a very challenging process in Crewkerne and Ilminster. The conversations that Phil and the local education leaders in Frome are having is with the intent, the clear intent to avoid the challenges that we had in Crewkerne and Ilminster for everyone involved. While a statutory process is still potentially something that would be beneficial, if we don't need a statutory process, if that's not desired by the local community, if there are other ways of doing it, they will be prioritised. And as Phil indicated, the conversation was only initiated by invitation. It has been a collaborative process, It has been about bringing people around the table, and as you've indicated, the direction that's being set again has been set by the local education community in terms of a wider collaboration with stakeholders. So we are looking for a soft way of engaging the community in setting its own direction and facilitating that in terms of community leadership, and trying to learn the lessons that came through, why that wasn't possible in Crooken and Ilminster to achieve that goal, which was always everyone's desired outcome at that time, but in the end game proved impossible to achieve. So our hopes remain high that this will remain a collaborative process with everyone around the table throughout.
And that's why we're here. That's why it's coming to this committee, isn't it? So that we're ahead of the game in that way. Ruth, if you want to continue with your questions, please.
Yeah, thank you. So my next question really is, if we're having these conversations and children, young people and families are not involved in them already, how can we be saying that it's going to involve the community? So I think we need to start having those wider conversations sooner rather than later. Having gone through the Ilminster experience and knowing how upset some families were about not being involved in the process early, I think that's a lesson that we really need to learn from this. My next question is, in light of what we've seen with the budget and the pressures on the current budget, is now the right time to be doing this because of the cost implications that could potentially come through? So my next question.
So as I've indicated, at this present time, we don't have a plan to enter into any kind of statutory change. No decisions have been taken, and we're not currently anticipating a statutory process. As Phil's indicated, in the fullness of time, that may be something that is appropriate. It may not be. And I think in terms of, as Phil's indicated, engaging the wider community, this is about doing things in stages. So it's a gradually widening circle. So as schools have indicated, they're widening that to a wider group of stakeholders to understand their views. And then if that consolidates a way forward, then that will widen further. But the intention is, there's no, as we knew in Crooken and Ilminster, there was immediate pressing financial and other pressures in the system. And the community didn't have the benefit of time. Frome has the benefit of time, and this conversation can be a very long one, if a very long one is beneficial to everyone. So I think, as we encountered, it really heightens the sensitivity in the process when it has to be done within a certain space of time. So this is a very, very slow conversation, and the community still has the opportunity to do that. So I think absolutely, if any change is mooted, that will be with the whole community involved. But it's important that this be a slow conversation. And at this moment in time, it's not clear that any change is necessary. What we're flagging is that players in the system may make their own decisions. And what we're trying to do, learning from history, is for those to be decisions that are not made unilaterally, they're made as part of a community, so that as individual institutions make their own decisions, they're doing that together and moving in a direction that is open and shared with others.
Thank you. And then my last question is, and you may not be able to answer this, obviously we have dealt with the free tier system in the Crooken and area. We're now looking at the Frome. Are there plans to look at the Minehead area at any point in the future?
I would say again, we would only participate in a conversation if there was an invitation to do so. So if education leaders were to approach us and say that they would wish our support in their conversations, then we would obviously offer that, but we wouldn't instigate a process.
Thank you for your questions. Councillor Lovell. Martin.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to ask the stupid question. What is the problem to which this might be the answer?
So as I indicated, we are in Frome. It was at invitation. If anyone else were to approach us, it would only be by their invitation. I think what Phil has tried to illustrate is the perception in the community and in the education community is that it is very messy. And that messiness can have detrimental impacts in different ways. It can involve people leaving the system to seek education that is offered in a different way. It can create tensions and it can create financial pressures in one way or another. Now, I don't think, as we had in Crewkerne and Ilminster, there was a very clear, pressing and time-sensitive issue that needed to be addressed. In Frome, well, and maybe Phil can indicate from the conversations, the kind of things that people have raised in terms of why they wanted put on the table. But I think there isn't a single driver. There's a multitude of views about things that people feel could be better. But also I think there's a driver behind this of opportunity, of could there be evolution rather than revolution that would make things work better for children. But I think that's why it's a slow conversation to say, if you are going to change anything, can the whole community agree what the benefits of doing that would be, and also agree what the things are that are causing friction? I don't know if you want to reflect on any of the things that came from that conversation, or if it's too early to say, Phil.
Thanks, Amelia. Yeah, there are a range of issues. And we talk about education structures, but also the partnerships and the feedback from the schools in the Frome areas that their partnerships, their ability to work together has been compromised to some degree, and therefore we are not getting the very best offer for our children and their families. So this is an opportunity to revisit all of those things, understand what we could improve and when, and kind of implement some of those things over time.
Thank you.
Could I briefly come back, Chair? Just coming back. So I read into that there's no solution being imposed. That it isn't the view that a particular way of doing things is how it should be. Thank you.
Nothing will be imposed at all. That is, incontrovertible, and certainly would not be imposed by us. So I think the clear imperative for us is to facilitate a stronger system if the system wishes to be stronger. And that's the message that came to us. They want a stronger system that works better together. And we are acting as a convener for a community discussion. We're not interested in imposing any model onto that community.
Thank you for that clarity. Okay, I've got Councillor Borden bringing online, and then Francis wants to come back for a quick questions, and then we'll look to move on. So, Councillor Borden, Adam.
Hi. Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm very encouraged by this discussion being in the way it is, and I'm quite grateful for Councillor Lovell's question, because that was my one. What's the driving force here? And I think is a combination of outcomes and opportunities and costs and difficulties with the complex messiness of it all. And I'm pleased to see that it's not going to be an imposition, as it hasn't been elsewhere in the country, and the community is going to be involved. And I had an email from Kat recently about the steering group that's forming, so that's going to be useful. And I've also asked the Frome LCN look into this and have a presentation that we've just had and an update from that, and that's been accepted, so that's good. So the community will start to hear what's happening in this sort of presentation and discussion. I'm thinking, does this include within its scope the future of SEN education in the area, and potentially to try and perhaps address reasons why people are homeschooling? And also, will it be looking into, within the scope, the potential future of Berkeley School and the potential for a new school behind Asda at Edmund Park? Is that's something within the mix of things? We can't say much more than we're looking at it right now. But I'm encouraged by the discussion. The scope of the costs and the implications and the disruption is all later down the line. But it would also be helpful if perhaps we had more information in the report in March. I haven't seen that. No councillor has seen that locally. That might be useful if we could. Thank you.
Thank you. Perhaps some of those points could be taken up outside of this meeting in relation to getting you the additional data and the information. I'm just conscious we don't want to start getting too local on it because we will get caught up in other things. But Phil, if you just want to come back quickly for Councillor Boyd, and then we'll look to move on.
Thank you. Thanks for the question, Adam. In terms of SEND and vulnerable learners, that's very much going to be a discussion point, and our colleagues from Inclusion have already attended the meetings at Selwood Academy and intend to continue those discussions with us. On school places generally, we constantly reviewing the projected numbers for Frome. We know that we have available school sites should we wish to use them. The conundrum for us is making sure we have sufficient developer contributions to build those schools as and when they are required. We know that there have been some outline proposals for developments in and around Frome which haven't come forward to this point, but perhaps the recent decisions around phosphates will bring them forward. But as we see them in our projections, we will bring forward our school place planning plans.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you. Francis, you want to come back quickly, please?
Very briefly, with 2 points. One, since the Minehead area was mentioned, I ought therefore to declare an interest as co-chair of governors of 5 of the schools in the area. And I think the whole area is very open to discussions and is working very closely with everybody in sight so far as we can in, again, a very mixed area. And the other bit, it was just to say, I'm aware from discussions and decisions that have been taken over the years, in fact, in that area, how much support the local authority can offer and may need to offer to help make sure that people feel enabled to make the decisions. I was present at one meeting where after the meeting, I was told by people who had voted that they had voted the way they knew to be wrong because they couldn't do it and they wanted the local authority to overrule them. And as another, and the local authority didn't, and one more, just one more, that at another meeting, there were 1 or 2 people who said, I know this is the right decision to take, but I can't take it, and resigned. And just, those are 2 illustrations of just how difficult it is and how much support may be needed.
Thank you for that, Councillor Nicholson. We're starting to go on a tangent there, so let's try and come up. So thank you for that. Thank you, members, for your Phil. Thank you for your presentation. Amelia, thank you for the support there. If and when you feel that there's a need to come back to us, Phil, then please let us know. And the same goes for any members if there's any need. I think it's a really interesting and for new members is a useful learning opportunity that aren't there. Okay, Phil, thank you. We're moving on then, members. What I will do, just so that the next item is being presented, we'll do the next item, and then what we'll do, we'll take a comfort break, and then to come back, so it saves you having to go any further. So, Jane.
Thank you, Chair. So for those of you who haven't met, my name is Jane Shelburne-Barrow. I'm the Service Director for Children and Families, presenting this report on behalf of Claire Windsor today. I understand online as well there are 2 colleagues from Devon, Adopt South West, and from Cornwall Council as well, so they may well come into the discussions and for answering any questions. So before I actually turn to the reasons for the paper coming here, I thought it'd be important just to do a little bit of background really into what the Regional Adoption Agency is, why it's in place, etc, etc. So what we know is adoption, just to say, is really, really important for children's social care. We know the children that come into our care at an early age, if we can actually achieve permanence for them at a very early stage, and ideally through adoption, then their outcomes are going to be so much better. So the provision of adoption services is really key to our agenda and achieving good outcomes for children. Prior to the Education and Adoption Act in 2016, all authorities delivered their own adoption services. So that was everything from recruitment, support, assessment, right through that process. The Education and Adoption Act 2016 gave the Secretary of State that power to direct us not only to work more closely together, but to actually join together to allow those adoption functions to be carried out, being led by one local authority or agency. And Devon Cabinet agreed in 2018 for Adopt South West to be hosted by Devon. At that point, Somerset, Torbay, Plymouth joined Adopt South West. So since 2018, that has been functioning, and that service is being delivered, and to a very high standard, and a standard that certainly in Somerset we have been very happy with. It's really important to say that whilst all that recruitment and work around finding the right adopters for our children is carried out by Adopt South West, we remain responsible for those children seeking adoption. So our social care teams remain, there are children in our care whilst adopters are being looked for. That's really important that we don't lose that responsibility. So at that time, Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly did not join a regional adoption agency. And it's at this point that they now wish to become part of Adopt South West. And certainly what Cornwall was clearly saying in their business case, which you have been sent as a confidential paper, is that whilst obviously they could choose to join any regional adoption agency, they feel Adopt South West is the right one for them. It's well performing, and some of our Essex certainly have done a peer review of it, and it comes out very, very positively. As part of Adopt South West, we clearly sit on operational and strategic boards around the governance for Adopt South West. So it's not a case of we've handed it over, we're fully engaged in all the reviewing, the development, etc., etc. So therefore, all the proposed changes have been to those boards, and we've been fully engaged in those discussions. So there are three sort of key areas that are being brought to you today to scrutinise and have a view on. The first is around the request from Cornwall to join the regional adoption agency Adopt South West. From an officer's point of view, from Somerset's point of view, what we know about Cornwall is they have an outstanding adoption service and also an outstanding Ofsted inspection grading from 2019. So we do feel that Cornwall will bring a really good contribution to Adopt South West. We also recognise, and it kind of balances up, that it will open up other adopters as well, Cornwall coming in, but obviously there will also be children from Cornwall seeking adoptive placements, but that's just important to point that out. So we have no certainly issues from a Somerset point of view around Cornwall joining. We know that will also impact on Adopt South West around the costings for staff to bring another authority in, and that will be a shared cost across the system, with Cornwall being part of that sharing of the cost too. So the second area is around the funding formula for each council's contribution, and I think it's important to say that the proposal to revise the funding formula is not as a result of Cornwall asking to join. Since Adopt South West came into being, there's been an ongoing discussion around ensuring that funding formula reflects the activity and is set up. And I think how it was originally set up is far it's no longer reflective, certainly, of the council's involvement in it. Again, important to say that from Somerset's point of view, we would say that the proposed funding formula does reflect activity. We get a lot of activity from Adopt South West. Somerset and Devon are clearly the largest authorities, and therefore we use the services more than some of the smaller authorities. So we are not in dispute over the funding formula that has been put forward, but it does mean that there is an increase to our contribution financially. So, but that has been budgeted and noted, and we are not in dispute over it. So you can see the additional cost to Somerset is estimated to be 224,000 from 26-27 if a 3-year phasing is applied, or from 25-26 if the 2-year phasing is applied. What we also know is Adopt South West does overspend, and I think it's important to note that. We obviously scrutinise spend and look at it, but what we know is that that overspend is always linked with those agency costs where we can't find adopters within the local authorities and have to go out to agencies to find adopters. What I would say about that being the agency decision maker in Somerset is that we have successfully place some very complex children with complex medical needs, and often it's those carers that will be linked with agencies who may specialise in that particular health kind of understanding and environment and support adopters in that way. So just in the same way that we are struggling with sufficiency around fostering, the numbers of adopters is going down. And actually, you know, we often do have to go out to agencies to look at that, but we are being successful in finding adoptive homes for our children. Okay, so the third area is with regards to the timescale for the phasing. And again, there's been a lot of discussion around this between the authorities in Adopt South West, with some authorities arguing for it to come in immediately and others asking for the full 3 years. Somerset would have preferred the 3-year phasing. However, certainly Devon, who are the other area to actually take an increase in budget as a result of this, suggested they would be happy with the 2, and the directors of Children's Services have agreed that they propose, if it's agreed through democratic processes, for a 2-year phasing of it to come in. So that's the kind of overview of where we are and why it's come in today. And I know, as I say, there are colleagues on the call if there are any specific questions you would like answered.
Members, any thoughts, comments or questions? We'll go for Councillor Wilkins first. Richard?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, on the adjustment to the formula, I just want to know whether if Cornwall does come into this, obviously we've had to adjust when you've re-looked at the thing. Is there in place something to re-look at Cornwall's contribution to make sure that they're paying the fair amount as well when that comes around, because obviously they'll, like us, they came in at a certain rate, so I'll be intrigued to know how you've put that into place.
So I'm happy to come in first, but if Julie or Alison want to comment. So my understanding is when the funding formula was done, it was done without Cornwall coming in, and then the same funding formula with Cornwall and Isles of Scilly joining. So it does reflect the proposed activity and looking at kind of Cornwall's current activity around adoption. Julie, did you want to come in on that at all?
Alison's got it, I think, by the look of it. So Alison?
Hi, yes, I'm the chair of the operational board of Adopt South West, Alison Davis. And just to confirm that the figures have been calculated originally without Cornwall, and then on the same basis that we've considered every authority's input, we've calculated Cornwall's, and we will review it probably after 3 years again to make sure that we have got the apportioning of the percentages right.
Thank you. I see you took your mic off, Julie. Do you want to comment quickly?
Thank you. It's just to echo what Alison has said. That's absolutely my understanding too. And the figures have been very, very carefully and closely calculated. And Cornwall are fully aware that obviously the reviews will take place. Sorry for the croaky voice, everyone. I'm recovering from COVID. I'm really sorry if I sound faint or croaky.
Richard, did you just quickly, please?
No, you answered my question the second time round, so thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Councillor Caswell, Simon.
It's going on really from what Richard was asking, because I noticed on page 5 of the information we're given, it says the proposed revising funding formula increases the Somerset percentage from 23.55% to 22.35%, which is actually a reduction in percentage. So how does that tally with the estimated increase in cost to Somerset Council, or is it an error in the percentages on the page 5?
For those on page, it's penultimate bullet point. Alison, come in.
I believe the 23.5 or whatever it is refers to before Cornwall would be calculated in it. And then the 22 is the new figures once Cornwall is brought into the equation and we've looked at the new split of percentages. So it is an increase on what it would have been if Cornwall wasn't joining, I think. But 22 is the right figure anyway.
Thank you. Julie?
Thank you. That's my understanding too, just to confirm that.
So, well spotted, Simon. Thank you.
Yes.
But what we'll do, rather than get caught up in numbers, because I don't do numbers, we'll just ask for clarification. I get a clarification note sent out and appended to this, to our minutes, so that we can, an after note, as they like to call them now. Simon, your microphone's on. Are you still? Thank you. Bruce.
Just two things. One is a point of clarification. So this is Cornwall and Isles of Scilly. Okay. So my question is then, you've mentioned about the fact that Cornwall Council is rated as outstanding. I notice that you haven't stated that the Isles of Scilly have been rated as inadequate. So what risk does that pose for us, if any?
Alison, are you able to come back on that? I'm not aware. I would have to seek clarification around Isles of Scilly, that's all.
I'm not aware of that. So I'm looking to Julie really for clarification.
I can clarify that that's a very, very recent Ofsted judgment with the Isles of Scilly. Cornwall Council have a current service-led arrangement with the Isles of Scilly around their adoption. The Isles of Scilly don't actually have any adopters or children requiring adoption, and that's been static for many years, despite recruitment campaigns, despite everything that we do as part of that. I do know that they've been linked with Essex in terms of their improvement journey, who have a very, very strong track record as peer authorities in terms of assisting other authorities to raise their Ofsted rating and to get much better for their children's outcomes. So if that offers a level of confidence, they have definitely got a very clear pathway in place in terms of raising that rating.
Having been through with Essex here, I can support that they have a good record of supporting councils. Bruce, was that your question, or did you?
I was going to come back actually. I was just going to say, if we're not aware of that judgment, has that been factored into the risk assessment of this proposal? Because the report is quite concerning, Chair, is probably the word that I would use.
So what I've done is, so the reason it's coming to us now is so that we can feed our comments and thoughts into it before the decision is being taken. So I know that we've noted that the comment and for clarity there, and we'll make sure, and I'm making a couple of notes as we go, so we'll make sure that we're there. But did you want to come in, Jane?
Just to say, I'm happy to take that away and look at that from actually how many children do they have in care, and obviously if there's a service level agreement already with Cornwall and they're working with them already, then it's just important to look at all of that.
So thank you for highlighting that. It's an important point, and we'll make sure that that's clarified for the decision maker when that comes around. Councillor Hunt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, it's a bit of a naive question, really. The £224,000 it's going to cost Somerset Council to do this, to agree to this, particularly in the current financial situation that we're in. What is the gain to Somerset Council? I'm sorry if that's naive, and I've not read this through. I have to be honest.
It's an interesting point, actually. One of the points one of the questions that I was going to ask is this demonstrating best value? Who wants that?
I'm happy to come back to start with. I don't know if Tessa would like to come in as well. I mean, clearly what we know is we are delivering better adoption services through being part of Adopt South West. Opening up more opportunities for more adopters and learning from the outstanding practice in Cornwall gives us that opportunity to hopefully increase the number of adopters that we have access to get more children who are able to be adopted actually into adoptive placements, because at the moment, whilst as an agency decision maker, I may on average in a year sign sort of 40 children to say actually adoption is the right plan for them. We don't currently end up replacing that many children, which the cost, how quickly we can then spend 224,000 on a child in long-term fostering who is in an adoptive placement very quickly kind of rules that out. So I think seeing it in that way, it sounds quite crude, but it's actually quite helpful to look at that around that.
Thank you for that. Okay, members. Julie, I see your hand just gone up.
Just very quickly, in terms of outcomes for children, that, as we all know, is why we're all here, but also linked to costings and savings. Cornwall have a very, very preventative approach in terms of fostering and adoption, but we're talking about adoption here. So in terms of our supportive model to adopters, we're already working on our practice streams with Adopt Southwest. We've forged fantastic working relationships, and we're already talking about adopting Cornwall's supportive model to adopters, and our breakdown rates, which do get very, very costly and you know, very importantly, cause an awful lot of distress for children. Our breakdown rates are very, very low. We have very good performance in terms of prevention and supporting adoptive families.
Thank you. Okay, members, thank you. Richard, did you want to come? I was just going to look to move on. Thank you. I'm just going to say to members, thank you for that. Thank you, officers, for presenting. So I think the consensus, we're generally supportive. There are a couple of points that we want the decision maker to become, a couple of points we need clarified to us, first of all, with an after note, and then to ensure that the issues in relation to the island, silly, etc., are included in the report, so that the decision maker can make sure that those points are considered when they come to take that decision. No other issues or points. If you're happy with that, members, okay. Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us, ladies, online. You're welcome to stay, but we're going to have a break now and then come back for our last couple of items. Okay, members, so we are at 5 to 12. I will be looking to start at 5 past 12, so 10-minute comfort break. Thank you for your time. Next little placements task and finish group, a response from from executive, Councillor Munt.
Thank you very much indeed, Lee. So members will remember that Children Family Scrutiny Committee, there were a number of points made, and I'm going to make my responses now. If I may, I'll take them one by one, if that's all right, Lee. Thank you very much indeed. So the first one was that the council enhances its own capacity and provision for placements by creating more homes in Somerset. As part of our strategic partnership with the Shore Trust, Homes and Horizons, the council has committed to 8 homes for Somerset children in Somerset. In addition, plans are underway to construct 2 pods for semi-independent accommodation and 2 crisis annex buildings, all of which are planned to be open by the end of 2025. There are currently already 5 homes open and 6 children living in them, with plans for a further 4 children to move into these homes over the next few months. A capital bid will be made this autumn to create the potential to develop homes 9 and 10, as set out in the business case for this project in 2021. The Council's sufficiency strategy is being redrafted to take into account the significant changes in demand, capacity and the costs of care, and will address how to best develop and engage with care providers locally alongside our own provision to ensure that Somerset's children have the homes they need as locally as possible. The second point was that the council should not make any placements in homes which are not registered with Ofsted, and there is an explanation of this term a bit later on. The council takes seriously its duty to provide high quality regulated care for children that we look after. Sadly, the lack of capacity locally and nationally has led in recent years to a small number of children being placed in unregistered and therefore unlawful placements for short periods of time. These children often have very high levels of need, involving serious and life-threatening self-harm or violence to others. No provider locally or indeed nationally has been willing to provide care in crisis, despite our repeated and frequent searches. The children in this situation are typically subject to deprivation of liberty orders, so their situation is well known to the Family Proceedings Court, who monitors the timescales and quality of care whilst registered provision is identified. Each child also has a court guardian who represents their interests in the court arena. The situation of any child in these circumstances is reviewed weekly by the Service Director, Children and Families, and the Head of Service for Children Looked After and Care Leavers, and presented to a panel chaired by the Executive Director, Children, Families and Education, monthly. any child who has been in an unregistered home in the previous quarter is also discussed with the Chief Executive, the Leader of the Council, Lead Member for Children, Families and Education on a 3-monthly basis. There are currently 5 children in unregistered homes. That number is reduced from 11 as the highest number in the last financial year. 3 of these children have clear plans to move to Homes and Horizons homes shortly. The third point you made, members, was that the council considers buying local block contract places to increase the capacity or provision. Again, there's a little bit more information provided in writing. Where it is appropriate, block contract places are purchased locally with external providers. This way of procuring homes is regularly reviewed to consider the quality of providers and the needs of children who need homes to avoid a costly void bed space where children of different needs cannot be placed alongside each other due to Ofsted regulations. Your fourth point, that the council pledges that the language used in this area should always refer to placements rather than children when reporting on work to support our children who are looked after. Our children in care and care leavers have asked that we refer to where they live as their home rather than their placement. All children deserve to have a home where they feel they belong, and the word home supports that ambition. And the chair will be aware of my passion for saying homes for children, not the reverse of that, children's homes. Homes for children. Your fifth point was that the council lobbies government through the Local Government Association to better support councils with guidance, help with forecasting and impact planning, reviewing regulations and commissioning an annual State of the Sector review. This council is working to find effective solutions to the many problems and challenges faced by our children in care, but will need further support from government in order to achieve the very best for those children and young people. The Association of Directors of Children's Services is in regular conversation with central government about the lack of sufficiency of homes for children in care, including the quality and cost impacts on councils. The Stable Homes Built on Love report, commissioned by government and published in February 2023, sets out a pathway to reimagine high quality care. And your sixth point was that, along with the Homes and Horizons report, an update be brought to the Scrutiny Committee in 6 months. Prior to coming back, the Corporate Parent Board should feed into that scrutiny meeting. My response to that is that we would welcome the input of the Corporate Parenting Board. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. Obviously, with the current situation where we are with the evolving of placements, the coming back to us would be welcomed. What I will say for members that have stayed for this second part, thank you for that. But what I will say is the report, for those who haven't seen it, it would be is an interesting read, only because what we've tried to do is help to explain some of the differences in it, registered, unregistered, etc. Is there, so it's worth a read because it gives you a good outline of where we are. So I would say that. Thank you for your response, Tessa. Are there any questions or comments? Anyway, it looks like you got off easy with that one, Tessa, so thank you for that. Members, thank you. So thank you for the response. As I say, with this committee would always work with the executive to try and find a way forward the best we can, and if we can be further helpful, then please come back to us.
Can I just say that it's very helpful to have the Scrutiny Committee so involved and asking us questions. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Okay, that was item 9 of our agenda. Timely that we move on to item 10 of our agenda. I'll introduce Julia to introduce her colleagues in a second, but just for a bit of a background for the other members in the room, this project is something that's been running for 2 terms pretty much. of this council. That's why there's been an overlap. One of the things that the committee said previously when we was to ask for the final report to come back to us, and more to the point, for us to be given an indication of what learning has been able to be adopted or rolled out across the county. I'm not wishing to steal some of Julia's thunder, but I stand to be corrected. But the West Somerset was looking to be one of the first areas in the country where the number of people over 60 outnumber the number of people under 60. So that, at one point, so that's an interesting statistic that to bear in mind as we move forward. Enough of my waffling. Julia, welcome. If you'd like to introduce yourself and give us your update. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I'm really honoured to be invited back. Can I just check how I will show my slides before I start? Do I do it on here, or do you guys do it for me?
If you can.
So I go into the meeting and it then comes up. Okie dokie.
While Julia's getting her notes up, but just a bit about the WSOA is the West Somerset Opportunities Area. It isn't the written statement of action, which it was confused for a while as to when it.
Certainly,
I'm sure, but RWM.
Education Relationship Manager.
Okay, and NEET, NEET.
On education, employment, training. Some of them are in our glossary, but I'll make sure that that's circulated again while I've filled the gap.
I think RWM is reading, writing, and mathematics. That'll be your Key Stage 2 examination.
Do you want us to share it?
You can tell I haven't done this for a long time, goodness me. So my name's Julia Ridge and I'm head of Vulnerable Learners now, which will become important as we go on with the conversation. But I invited a colleague to join me today. This is Naomi Phipp. Naomi was a new head teacher when the opportunity area started. Not a new to head teacher because she was a head teacher in Wales before, but she had just joined the Dunster First School. And is now the executive head teacher at the Moorland Federation, which is 5 first schools: Dunster, Exford, Cutcombe, Timberscombe and St Jubricius in Porlock. She's also the executive head teacher of Dolverton All Saints and Dolverton Junior School, and leading on Langford Budfield School near Wellington. That's 8 schools. So thank you very much. And the reason for inviting Naomi is that she's been through this whole journey with us. And when you want to ask questions about how it feels in the schools, then actually Naomi would be better placed to comment than me, because I might give you a tarnished or a view that's mine rather than how it is for the schools. So thank you for joining me. Right. So my role in West Somerset was a very privileged role. It was a role funded by the Department for Education, and this is, I think, probably very few projects are like this. There was no bid. No one wanted or bid for this money, and in fact there were some people who said they didn't want this money because they didn't want West Somerset to be seen as an area of deprivation, because obviously tourism is really important to West Somerset. So the DFE chose West Somerset along with 11 other local authorities and gave the money to West Somerset community, but they led the project. They had the governance and they understood what they wanted to achieve, but they chose to fund a project team in the authority and they funded me to work alongside them. I saw my role as understanding what the West Somerset schools and people needed and communicating that effectively to the DFE. And then when the DFE decided to do something different, me persuade them they needed to do what we suggested. And that was how it worked probably for about 5 years. I really enjoyed learning so much more about a community. And I don't think as officers we can underestimate that. So being locally based, knowing our schools well, knowing our school leaders well, knowing our partners in the voluntary and community sector well, helped me solve things, helped me add value and bring things together in a way that hadn't been possible before. And I don't think I quite appreciated how powerful that was, but every so often colleagues would phone me and say, we couldn't do this without you. And I was thinking, well why couldn't you? But it's that connection of dots and those things that you can have around. So I had a marvellous time for the years, but it's not about me. And so this is going to look at we're not going to comment too much on the report because that's a DFE report and I'm not actually allowed to talk about what the DFE think of their project, but it's there for us. And I've taken examples for there to give you 5 externally funded projects that have blossomed across the country or within Somerset, and then 5 local practices that have aligned. Right, so this is the report. It's from the Centre of Education and Youth. One of the things that any of you will know who do data and do cause and effect, you have to have control groups and you have to have distinct areas of work. West Somerset is too small for control groups and we didn't have distinct areas of work. The schools and the community had it all. That in itself actually was an interesting lesson for us. So the externally funded projects I'm going to touch on are Working in Partnership for Early Help, Holiday Activities of Food, Early Years Training, Somerset Works, and Vocational Training in Bridgewater and Minehead. So the first thing was partnership working with the community. I knew that the lottery would say that Somerset was a black spot, that they didn't actually have that much funding coming into Somerset because we didn't bid well enough. We didn't have organisations that were large enough to have the bid writers to draw down the big loads of money. I was working with Blackpool. Blackpool had a £4 million early years bid. That's not where Somerset that we had before was able to do. So I met with the lottery and Somerset Community Foundation every 6 weeks, talking to them about the needs that we were finding, talking to them about what their aspirations were and how they would like us to bid. I then worked with the communities. The ones here were Home Start and also Minehead Eye. And what the lottery said is, stop being little communities, come together, be bigger, have more ambition. And they set up Kite, and that was actually funded beyond the opportunity area and is going from strength to strength. Alongside that, a consequence of that was Somerset Community Foundation did a number of hidden Somerset reports. They did one on rural isolation in July 2019, unseen youth in February 2020, and food poverty in 2021. Those reports were partly as a result of the opportunity area, because we were able to establish issues and then broaden them out across the wider community. For those of you who've worked with me will know that food became really important, especially in COVID. The DFB had a really good idea and they said, we're going to give £15 to every family a week to go and get their food. And these are the supermarkets you can go to. What we really realised early on was in West Somerset, these supermarkets that could take those vouchers were in one place and they were within 200 metres of each other, Morrison's and Tesco's. The whole of that rest of the community did not have shops that could take those vouchers. That in itself can be sorted, but it gave another image to me. It gave me the image that in all of those other communities, they had to pay more for their food. And I have to say a big thanks to the co-op because they support West Somerset hugely. But we did some data. Food in West Somerset from the co-op is 15% dearer than it is cheaply in Morrison's or Tesco's. And if you then look at that for our vulnerable families who have to pay for diesel and cars to get where they need to go to, it starts to be a really big issue. We were contacted by FareShare, who now provide food all over the county. And they said to us, would you like help? And we said, yes, please, thank you. So that's part of the work that we've done. This one I wanted to pick up on because it is about holiday activities. Frank Field, as you maybe recognise, is a significant politician from the past, who did a really good report on vulnerable learners and the importance of food during the holidays. And he said children need at least 2 good meals a week. But it's more important to put strong activities around it, to give children opportunities that build with the food. And this now is a national programme that's rolled out across Somerset. And we didn't try and do it ourselves through our schools. We use the capacity of the voluntary sector, and it's led by Somerset Activity and Sports Partnership. As a result of the Learning from West Somerset, their bursary schemes, their resources for children with young SEND and transport. So we're really pleased to see our learning adopted more broadly. Early years, oh my goodness. For those of you who don't know, and I had been on the leadership team, I think, in education at that time for probably 15 years. I did not know that the academic performance and in the early years in West Somerset was the worst in the country. Never occurred to me. The data wasn't cut up in that way, didn't know. I think everybody was heartbroken by that, because that's not what any of us as professionals would want to be, and it was a shock. So the actual settings were remarkable, but things that we learned from that very early on. Training is impossible. You have to drive, at the time, you had to drive to Taunton or Bridgewater. Early years settings have to be open from 7:30, 8 o'clock to 6 o'clock for workaround. Staff were exhausted. It wasn't happening. What we then did was put in programmes of learning around maths and English, how children learn, physical development. But what we realised was the professionals we were talking to knew their area. They were really good on early years maths or early years physical education, but they were using different words to describe different things to the professionals. Now, I say professionals, you and I both know that they are paid really low amounts of money in early years. So we have to be really effective with our training. So we brought our providers together and said, you need to work holistically here because you need to have maximum impact when you're working with our early years providers, which they did. What's interesting is one of our providers is ICANN. ICANN has now, in their new learning name, taken on the national contract with the DFE to train all early years providers nationally, and they are doing the holistic approach that we pioneered in West Somerset. So that West Somerset work has gone out nationally across the country. Somerset Works, that's about helping children who are at risk of not being in school or and employment and training. Here, we tested some work. That was then used for a bid, and that bid brought in £750,000 worth of money from the European Social Fund. It brought in £150,000 from the Times, and we also used some of our COVID recovery work. Somerset Works is still with me as part of my new team in vulnerable learners. Finally, vocational training as a national funding thing. For me, vocational training is a really big issue. It's really expensive to run. You have to have a cohort of between 12 and 15 children to afford it. There aren't that number of children in our rural communities. They therefore have to get on a bus and travel to one of our towns. The cost for transport is £950 a year. If you live next to your college in Bridgewater or Taunton, you don't have to pay that. But if you're in West Somerset, you absolutely do. But I think more importantly, often, not always, often the learners that go on to vocational studies are those who have struggled academically. They also actually struggle if they've done an hour's drive on a bus before they try and do their academic study at college and their journey back. And I say an hour, we know there are many children going more than that. So having local training is really important. So there was a bid led by Sedgemoor Council to have a Centre of Excellence for Health in Bridgewater in the old hospital, but also a satellite in Minehead. That's really important. Excuse me. That will work because the cohort of people that will be trained is whole population, not just year 13 or year 12, where we haven't got enough numbers. So delighted to see some vocational training and in an industry that we need. We need social care, because as Lee correctly said, lots of old people. Right, now I'm going to go on to how we as a council have worked differently. Connect Somerset, fantastic. And Richard's not here for me to say this, but part of my training has been with the Cabinet Office on commissioning, and Richard was one of my lecturers. And we looked at how to draw together the whole of the voluntary sector to help the public sector. And that was part of what he was teaching us. I took that learning, and I don't know why your maps are different to my maps. You seem to be on a delay. There's a triangle thing that will come up in a moment, which will show you all of the voluntary organisations that we work with in West Somerset. And it gives me absolute confidence that that will work in as we go forward with Connect Somerset. The next on my presentation, which is not doing what your presentation is doing at all, so I'm going to let that play, is strengthening.
Julia, if it helps, if you come out and go back in again, we had that problem earlier that it wasn't talking, so that might be. I'm happy just to pause for a second. And
Yeah, I'm worried about your time.
No.
Okay, no, we're going to go out and then we're going to come back.
It would be, yeah, it would be helpful to because you're speaking to the slides that aren't there, so just if you should be able to just do that, and it should bring you back in.
Okay. So what I love, by the way, just so you know, is that technology is slower than humans.
Now.
Oh. Fabulous. Let's see if that can happen. So this is really a pertinent point in this report, and I'm not convinced that I might know who wrote this bit actually. West Somerset being so tiny, it hits the same staff all the time. And then there's real pressure about wanting to engage with everything, but you just don't have enough time or enough people to go around. And I used to look at our small schools, 2 teachers, part-time receptionist, cleaner possibly, TA possibly. They had to run all of this in their school, then they had to attend our training, and then they had to manage things. They had to manage leading their curriculum in maths, in science, in English. They had to have a safeguarding lead. They had to have a SENCO. And they all need to be coming out, all the training that we do and all the briefings that we do and the DFE briefings. And then in their own jobs, they have to have parents' evenings and they have to have governors' meetings and then they have to do this and that. The head teachers have to, and they're teaching head teachers, by the way, so they don't have 5 days a week to do this. They have to do budgets. They have to do staffing. And then the staffing's about the other teacher, and there's only 2 of them. And how does that personal conflict happen in school? And then we have Ofsted, and then we have religious education, all of those things. And I used to come away from those meetings with those small heads and think, how can we add more to you? Because actually, there isn't the human capacity to do this. We need to be looking at things differently. And what we were encouraging our schools to do was to partner together. Now, obviously, the government recognise this and wish schools to become academies or join academy chains. So it's much better sorted. But for some of our rural communities, that's not their choice. And to be able to join local authority schools together in federations and building an infrastructure for that was a really powerful piece of work. Now, my lovely bit here is not moving forward now. Well, what you've now got on your slide is a lovely picture about Moorlands Federation, which we can answer more questions on. But I would like to point out that since the OA, Cupcombe has got a good, Dunster has got, oh, Dunster's old, but that's good, Exford good, Timberscombe good, and Porlock good. That's remarkable for tiny, tiny schools. Education redesign. I was privileged enough to lead this project with Amelia as my head of service. And I would come back and I would say, it isn't working because, and we'd have conversations about why it wasn't working. The report says that the key reasons which were challenged, and there was a lot that's at work, but we were challenged, were overload, teacher recruitment and retention, and transport and digital infrastructure. And I agree with all those challenges. So, strengthening our relationships with schools. We recognise that schools could support each other, but they didn't always know who was good and who needed support. And being able to know our schools well enough, but also for our schools to trust us when we ask them if they would like to help another school or if they'd like to receive help. That's quite a powerful thing, to be able to feel that you can ask somebody else or let somebody else know that you're weak and you would like some help in that particular area. It is the most effective way of doing school improvement, but it's very challenging to set up that infrastructure. Education relationship managers. I think that's a grand name for probably what I was doing in West Somerset at the time, which was really understanding the schools and understanding what they needed from the local authority. And when the local authority was becoming a barrier to what they needed, was to help them get it right and the local authority to understand what schools needed. Curriculum development. We had a lot of support when we were doing our work from the library service, not the school's library service, but the library service. They had Lego, they had IT equipment, they had all sorts of things above books, and they were really keen to work with us. So we joined the learning resources with the resources from the library service. And in the new structure, the school library service is alongside curriculum, and I think that new way of working of how they teach, allowing things online, building the curriculum to help children learn and putting resources along it, it's a really powerful way rather than asking schools to do all that themselves. Then we come to area inclusion partnerships, and this is where I am now. I'm responsible for setting up area inclusion partnerships across the authority, which I'm really delighted to be doing. So the model for area inclusion partnerships builds on West Somerset. In West Somerset, we have a delegated budget for preventing children from being out of school. We then have a manager, Elaine Detain, who works with the schools, really understanding at an early stage whose attendance is poor, who's starting to have suspensions, why are they having suspensions, and can we do things early to stop them becoming excluded. What that means in West Somerset is we very rarely have an excluded child because the needs are met within the community to varying degrees. What I wanted in West Somerset, but never imagined I could have, was the ability to influence council services as well. What I've been given in this new job is the ability to draw in the SEND team, the inclusion team, the educational psychology team to work alongside us so that we can have every Thursday discussions about the children in our area that we're worried about and how we can deploy our mutual or our group intelligence to help that school support those children. Alongside that, we're working really closely with Area Connect, or Connect Somerset Area Champions, and they are providing the voluntary sector support into those communities as well. So the ability has gone much wider than what we were doing in West Somerset, and the ambition is fantastic. I described this yesterday, and those of you who've worked with me before, when I talk about ponies a lot. Our area partnerships are like a foal. We're absolutely there. We're beautifully formed, but we're just a little bit thin around the edges at the moment. But as we strengthen, we will become, I think, really supportive of families and children to help their schools have the support around them to keep them in school. And the last one that I thought I'd choose was a trauma-informed approach. When I was working in Bridgewater, I went to Chiltern Trinity School and a professor came and spoke about children's learning. And I don't know what you know, I'm not a teacher. And I was really surprised to hear that in training to be a teacher, you don't have a section on brain development. And what you also didn't have was on which parts of the brain gets damaged at what point and how you can strengthen those parts of the brain. And the trauma-informed training that we had helped schools, teachers understand that. But more importantly, it gave teachers a way of understanding why children might be behaving in a particular way or a family might be behaving in a particular way. And the feedback we got from that training was phenomenal. The teachers said it was the best training they'd had in their career. It was completely changed their outlook on how they work with children. And that was really powerful. So I am delighted that as a council, we've taken on the trauma-informed approach and are appointing a manager to lead that across the council. The training won't be to the level that we had in West Somerset, but I think this whole ability to recognise really quite early what the drivers might be, because behaviour isn't the cause. The behaviour is one of the symptoms that we are working with, and we need, as professionals, to be one step behind that. And then I've put another slide in, was just about local community networks, not because of much really, other than the posh words for what we did in West Somerset was place-based working. And that's what local community networks are. So I thought I would finish on that point. Thank you.
Julia, thank you. I just want, did your colleague want to add anything to what you said? Was it an inclusive experience? Were you pleased that it happened? You probably need to move the microphone across.
It was a very inclusive experience. The way Julia engaged with us as schools was really powerful. It was both challenging in terms of her perspective coming completely differently from education. So some of the things that Julia would ask me, why don't we do that? Why can't we do that? Was really, really thought-provoking and really, really powerful. And also I think then that kind of understanding from school's perspective, it was very much a partnership, and those relationships that she talks about are really key. So actually bringing that voluntary sector together in West Somerset with education, and bringing the schools together along with, you know, that three-tier system, which we can't move, you know, we can't just move, we can move away from it in lots of different ways, but I'm being very careful what I say about that. But that in itself led to kind of, there were two transition points. So bringing all of those schools together to have those conversations was really, really important and transformational for curriculum, for relationships, for all sorts of things, and in terms of aligned thinking. So when Julia mentions about the Ofsteds, what she also didn't mention was that Timberscombe had an outstanding category for personal development. And the Ofsted inspector was really quite emotional and quite taken aback as to how this tiny little school could offer such a wide range of experiences, and in a way that was, we'd almost forgotten to mention some of the things that we did, and she happened upon them by accident because they are just part of the fabric of what we do. So that's really key. And also in terms of early years, Old Cleve has had an Ofsted inspection. They had outstanding, they're not within the Moorland Federation, they are within the Beacon Trust, but they had outstanding for their early years. And we've worked very closely with the head there, who's a real beacon in the area as well. So again, that shows the partnership working not just within Moorland, but outside of Moorland as well. So it's a credit to those. There's absolutely loads that I could talk about with Somerset, but I'm aware you might be on a time frame, so it might be better to go to questions.
Thank you. It's been something we've been watching as we go along since the start. It came to this scrutiny committee some years ago, and the thing that I saw during the COVID period was how you were already ahead of the game for some things. The free school meals, the holiday food, the holiday hunger campaign, and you were able to roll some of your learning from that out, which meant that things were made that much better sooner for people. I'm just conscious we've got a couple of members with hand, so Councillor Hadley first.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I mean, I'm the divisional member for Minehead, so I'm quite aware of the opportunity area, but there's just a couple of things I'd like to mention and get some feedback on, actually. But the first one, obviously, you've done some excellent work in there. Early years has really been one of the plus points. We can't forget that we are still having one or two schools in and around Minehead that are getting some pretty poor Ofsted inspections. So there's still lots and lots and lots of work to do on there before we can say we're all fighting and good on it. And the other one, actually, you mentioned the Training Centre of Excellence in Health and Social Care that's going in Bridgewater. That was a brilliant bid that went through. The only thing that's disappointed me, and I'd like to get your take on this, is that the satellite in Minehead that we were all hoping that would come to Minehead and actually help us in this area has now been divided up. Some of the money is going to be used to convert it into a police station. And is there now going to be enough room in that building to deliver everything that you envisaged that could go in there? And is it still going to be the vision that you had in the first place? Because I'm extremely worried about that, and it's something that we have talked about with other people. That the building, I'm not going to mention the building because it says here it hasn't been.
Careful that we're not asking officers to make decisions about things that are outside of their control.
I'm not asking for a decision. I'm just saying, are you happy?
So thank you. The bid said a provision in Minehead. It didn't say which one. And the one thing that I've learned about West Somerset is everything and everybody has to do 15 things. So if you talk to a member of the public in West Somerset, most of them, that's a fib actually, but most of them have 15 jobs. There aren't enough full-time jobs in West Somerset. So you have to be a cleaner. You have to care for the local farmers. You have to do this, you have to do that. And the only way you get enough population together is for things to do things jointly. So if there is a model now, which is showing a partnership working with another organisation, I would say, well done. That's more likely to make it sustainable going forward. And because there was no building identified specifically, what size it was going to be, I think it's difficult to gauge that whether or not there would be room. So what I would be unhappy about is if you said it wasn't happening. So it's happening, and if it can share its costs with another organisation, honestly, that is the strongest way that West Somerset will get what it needs. And let's hope the police also use it as a training venue, and we can encourage more young people in West Somerset to aspire towards a police career as well. We're hoping, always hoping, that we could use it for teachers and TAs too, because those people in the community can't afford to travel to Bridgewater or Taunton to get their training. So the more we can do locally in West Somerset, the better. And just for a conflict of interest, Naomi's also Chair of Governors of the West Somerset College, so we need to record that.
I owed someone a favour.
No, but the correct answer behind that is that actually it's that connectivity that we want to see between our schools and the system, and we want to see professionals challenging professionals. And so that owing a favour is actually about us taking professional responsibility and helping other organisations.
I'm sorry, I have a terrible sense of humour, but I'm secondary trained practitioner by trade, so it makes sense for me. In many ways, it makes sense for me to work with bigger organisations and more people together, and they're all our kids, they all funnel the same way, so we do have an absolute vested interest. All my heads of school do, and I do. But yeah, I apologise for my flippancy.
No.
Julia will keep me on the straight and narrow.
Thank you. Amelia, did you want to add something? Sorry.
So I just wanted to pick up on your point, Andy, about standards and about some of the inspection outcomes that have been coming through. And you mentioned Minehead in particular. I think I understand that you're going to be part of the new standing panel that we're setting up. And I think that's one of the kinds of things that we want that group to be looking at, is looking not just at the education data across the county, but in our different parts of the county as well, because we have some areas where parents have more choices and other areas of the county where those choices are rapidly diminishing, and that can put parents in an invidious position. So I think that's an opportunity. It's one of the reasons that Tessa has taken the decision to establish the standing panel. I know we've got some people around this table who will be part of that conversation, and a meeting's gone in the diary. That's exactly the reason why we need to have more of those in-depth conversations to report back to this group.
Thank you for that. Thank you. It's just interesting that for me, the conversations around bids for larger is interesting, because I hope that the council on a wider is listening to the how you've done there, because there are I know that over the past few years the number of bids and attempts we've made for has reduced, so that would be a good learning point as well. And I'll, with the executive member in the room, I'll say that I would hope that I know that it is the case, but that the executive are looking at this report and using every opportunity to take things from it in a positive way and bring it into the county. That's another pound in the fine box, to the new council, and the way it goes forward. It's welcomed. Members, any other points or comments? Francis.
Of course, I'm also a West Somerset bod. It was an enormously splendid thing to be involved in, and it was hugely good to learn as much as we did. There are things that will be ongoing and were clearly identified, and there are no easy answers to. And one is perhaps a truism, that it's the idea of a centre in Minehead is fantastic. That's still over 20 miles away from an awful lot of people in the area. You know, that we just, the reality is, which was what this was about, is even starker than perhaps we always realise. And the other one was the understanding, I'm not talking about early years so much as childcare. I didn't fall asleep and miss that, did I?
I didn't touch on childcare because that's a whole nother passion, that would also affect the economic development of the whole county.
It was absolutely the fact that there's no demand for childcare in Somerset was what was in West Somerset, which was what was understood. It's not true. It's just that the jobs don't pay enough to pay for the childcare. So you don't, the barriers to employment and are both childcare and kind of job, and it's what I'm trying to struggle to is it's all much more complicated than that, and that's what the West Somerset Opportunity Area showed us, and it's going to be much more complicated than that everywhere, and that I think is the most important bit of learning.
Thank you for that. I was going to say, Julie, if you want to, you can stop sharing now if you like. Make it easier for you there. If you want to come back, and I'll take Councillor Kravitz, who's online, and then we'll look to wrap up. Do you want to come back, Julia? Did you want to come back?
I think I would like to come back, and then Naomi would like to say what I would say that post-COVID, the other thing that we need to really factor into West Somerset is not only the complexities around childcare, but the complexities around housing and the complexity of second homes, how many people moved into the community. And we can recruit teachers into West Somerset, and then they go and try and find a house. And then they say, terribly sorry, we're going somewhere else. And that's a really significant effect that has come post-COVID. And I think we should recognise that. Sorry.
I was just going to just summarise, but I know somebody has a question online, so maybe we'll go to the question and then I can chip in.
Thank you. Marcus, welcome.
Thank you, Lee. Yeah, thank you. West Somerset Council, Dunster Division. So, yeah, and apologies, Lee, if this maybe isn't a question, more of a comment and a statement, but obviously it's an opportunity to make that comment and statement. But you touched earlier about the, and first of all, don't worry about flippancy and sense of humour. It's well needed sometimes in council meetings of all sorts. With regard to what you said about the cost of transport, and it's £900 odd. Obviously, we talk about an opportunity here, but actually that's a huge opportunity. The cost of that is so prohibited, and it's prohibited for all people. But then we get down to another factor, of course, and I can't miss any meeting without the opportunity to say that. Obviously, if there's training opportunities going out in, say, Bridgewater rather than Taunton, getting to Bridgewater is an issue, and we still don't have a bus to Bridgewater. Even those people who we talk about opportunities for people in West Somerset, and those children who decide to go to Bridgewater College rather than, say, Richard Hewish College, can get there in the morning, can get back at night. But anything in between times, they're stranded in Bridgewater unless they want to go via train to Taunton and back on a 28 bus, which brings me nicely to the fact that at the moment I hear rumours, and they are only rumours, that the 28 bus in the morning, along with the Hewish bus, are both full and standing only. And I've heard stories of it not being able to actually take people on at Willerton. Again, we can't get the basics right, and that's what really gets me back to get the basics right. Get a bus service that is regular and on time. Get buses that actually stop at bus stops. I know of an incident where a bus didn't stop at one bus stop and stopped 2.5 miles down the road down the Dunster Straight and just put the kids off. Unless we can deal with the basics as well. And it's getting there. And I appreciate, and what I can just say, and sorry for not saying it, this is possibly one of the most interesting presentations I've heard for an awful long time. And I would like to thank everybody for the work you do. It's fantastic stuff. And apologies if it's not necessarily a question, Lee, but I've got to get that in.
But the bit that I would add is that all of our presentations to this committee are wonderful. So I don't disagree with that. But
I said one of the most.
Members, I'm sorry, members. I'm not going to take any more after. I'll let we'll summarise. We'll move on. But just as an aside point, the second homes is quite interesting actually, as the point was made, and I will draw your attention to a campaign down in Cornwall at the moment, against second homes, and there is some government interest in that. So any of the local members down there that want to get involved, I would suggest that would be a really good thing to do so. But I'll leave you to have your...
And West Somerset really is right up there in the top counties, top communities that have been affected by second homes. I am going to just be really rude and nick just a moment. One of the bits of research we did really early on about transport was that people in rural areas aren't confident about the buses. They don't know whether they've missed it, whether it's not coming, whether it's full. And I did some research, and there was this company called Vroom and an app which would tell you exactly when your bus was coming, and it would tell you how many seats were on it. And in the communities it was used in, people loved it because they could see on their app that the bus was 2 minutes away. They'd run downstairs, get to the flat door and meet their child at the bus stop. Fabulous. And we tried to incorporate it. And I heard this week that First Bus are using that. And I just think results. And it's those things that aren't about buses, they're about people and confidence. So I heard all you were saying about the other challenges, but I just thought you'd be interested to know that something that was researched 6-7 years ago is now with First Bus.
I just wanted to say, obviously, I am privileged to work with lots of different schools, and during my time with the West Somerset Opportunities area, we did have lots and lots of training that we did feel really involved in selecting and choosing. And I think that isn't always the case in education. We're not always trusted as to make professional judgments that are right for our children and our communities. Sometimes there's a potentially a done-to view, and what may work in one area is then lifted and parachuted in, but actually with little understanding about the area it's being parachuted into. I think what worked really strongly with the opportunity area was the absolute commitment to understand the area and then to look nationally and internationally at what was the best possible solutions out there that we could then engage in. And it was really stark when I went as a local leader of education back when they existed. I think they've probably gone now. And I worked with another school who sat just outside the opportunity area, and it was really clear how they had just been so deprived of the training that we'd actually been lucky enough to have funded, have organised, and been able to have a part in. So that excellence in the classroom, you know, a real credit to Julia and the team as to how they did that. There is still lots of work to be done in West Somerset, and I just kind of wanted to say I'm really, really proud that we actually are leading the way in all sorts of things. We are some of the first group of schools in the Moorland Federation to be undertaking the GTech work, Google platform activity, and lots of our practitioners are going to be taking the level 1 exam, and that's credit to the work that we've done with County IT and through the opportunity area, the improvements in governance. There's so many things that have come about because of that wider understanding of the detail. But I would just leave you with saying there's still work to be done in West Somerset, and please don't lose sight of it as the councils have regrouped and redesigned themselves. And actually it would be very easy for West Somerset to become lost in those other statistics. We do have to think about our special educational needs. And I know that's high on the agenda for lots of reasons, but again, we talk about buses and transport. A lot of our most vulnerable children are on a bus for 2 hours a day in and out of the area, which I'm sure you're aware of. And the electively home educated hides a whole aspect around why they're at home and not in school. We do have work to do with the college, and we do have an issue with recruitment. So there are, although the opportunity area has done massive amounts of great work, and an absolute credit to Julia and the team that we worked with, there's still lots to do. And you sadly gave me a platform to say that, sorry.
Thank you, and your comments will be noted. I'm just conscious that I'm glad I was able to bring it. We were able to bring it back to the committee. I'm glad that there are still some learnings. There'd be no objection from anyone in this room about still things to be needed to be done. The good thing for me is the fact that Somerset has gained from the project, and Somerset in the wider sense as well as locally for yourselves. So on that point, thank you for your time. Thank you, Julia. Thank you for bringing it back. Members, thank you. Just very quickly, I'll move on to item 11 of our agenda, which is items for information. Just for your information, it notes that the education data briefing that had been circulated pre-meeting. It hasn't yet, but it will be. So that's something for the next agenda, the next there. The reason that the education data is on that list is because coming forward we will have some presentation, I think it's November, So it would be worth reading that before we go forward. Members, thank you very much for your time. For a change, I don't say this very often, one of our meetings is finishing early. Thank you for your time. Take care. Meeting over.
Thank you, Chair.